caught my cheating wife and her sister's husband in a shocking act, leading to an explosive revenge. The internet changed how we lived. Suddenly, everyone wanted a computer, including my family. We finally got one a couple of years back. Initially, it was a novelty. My wife used it for email and games, while the kids used it for homework and gaming. I browsed the web and watched adult content. I often worked late, leaving the factory at midnight. Unlike many guys, I headed straight home. Alone in the quiet house, I'd sit at the computer. Eventually, I got bored and started reading stories online. I became intrigued by tales of infidelity. These stories made me suspicious of my wife. I started scrutinizing her behavior, even arguing with her. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake my doubts. I read less over time, but the thoughts lingered. I even wondered about my own reactions if I caught her cheating. Would it turn me on? Discussing this with Deb only led to more questions. Our relationship had begun innocently enough, but doubt crept in. Deb's sister Sandy had a reputation for promiscuity. Though I'd been wild in my youth too, Sandy's behavior was on another level. Her carnal exploits were well known, including involvement in ménage à trois. I knew Bob from work. He was a day shift supervisor who got transferred. He invited me to his wedding with Sandy, who was just as wild as him. I wasn't fond of Bob because of his behavior toward Deb. Despite Deb's reassurances, I made it clear I'd protect her from him. We agreed to keep our past relationships private due to jealousy. Our conflicting work schedules strained our marriage. I didn't want to encounter someone Deb had slept with, nor did I want to admit I had been with her sister when our kids were young. Despite our differences, we managed to get along, though we didn't see each other much. Deb asked me to fix Sandy's leaking sink, knowing Bob was useless with repairs. I promised to take care of it on my way to work. While I worked, thoughts of Sandy's lifestyle as a possible wanton lingered, fueled by Bob's revelations. Despite Sandy's advances, I joked to keep things light. She didn't tempt me enough to risk my marriage. Arriving at Sandy's house, she greeted me provocatively. As I fixed the clog caused by eggshells and potato peels, Sandy hovered nearby, emphasizing her availability. "What are you doing, Sandy?" "I want you to stop it," I said. "I'm trying to finish this job." She paused briefly, allowing me to complete the task. When I stood up, she persisted. "Are you going to sleep with me now?" "No, Sandy, I can't do that. Deb is your sister and I love her. I won't cheat on her, especially not with her sister." "Have you forgotten how it was in high school? Are you too good to sleep with me now?" "Sandy, please. I love Deb. She doesn't know about our past together unless you tell her. You're a beautiful woman. But I love Deb." "You foolish man. Either you'll sleep with me or I'll tell Deb you did it anyway. She'll believe me. After all, I'm her sister." "Why are you doing this? Why hurt us? Deb is your sister and she loves you." Sandy laughed. "My innocent sister thinks she's perfect. Let's see how she reacts when I spill the truth." "Sandy, don't do this. I won't have sex with you, and I'll tell Deb about our past in school. I know she'll understand." Grabbing my tools, I declared, "I'm finished with your sink." I left in my truck, my mind racing. Would Sandy lie to Deb? At work, I tried calling Deb, but she wasn't home. I left a message expressing my love and the need to talk about her sister. The day dragged on with my thoughts consumed by the impending conversation. By evening, I called home again, but no one answered. Deb had left with Sandy and Bob, leaving the kids with me. I decided to keep them overnight. "Is something wrong?" Ray asked Deb's mom. "No, it's okay. If you see her, tell her I love her, and I'll see her tonight. I have to get back to work." For me, it was one of the longest nights. I knew I had to confess about Sandy before I met Deb. Finally, my workday ended, and I headed home, bracing myself for the inevitable conversation. Pulling up to the house, I noticed Sandy's car parked in the driveway, signaling an imminent confrontation. Unlocking the door, I was met with a shocking sight: my wife, Deb, Bob, and Sandy in compromising positions. Anger surged through me as chaos erupted. Waking up in the hospital, I found Patrolman G. Andrews by my side, explaining the events that had led to my injury. Confusion clouded my mind as I tried to make sense of the situation. "I see you're conscious now. I'm Patrolman G. Andrews. Where am I? And where's my wife? What happened?" "Take it easy, Mr. Harper. You have a concussion from a blow to the head with a glass vase. There was a fight at your home, and though charges were initially considered, they've been dropped. You're lucky. It could have meant 18 months in jail." "What about the attack on me? Witnesses say you were in a scuffle with your brother-in-law when his wife intervened, hitting you with the vase to stop the fight. It was a single blow to halt the altercation. You should be grateful the charges were dismissed. Where was my wife during all this? When we arrived, she was ill from excessive drinking. According to your sister-in-law, you became upset with her. leading to a confrontation with your brother-in-law, who is trying to protect her. Your wife doesn't recall much, only that there was shouting. If the charges are dropped, why are you here? My supervisor called when you weren't home yet and instructed me to wait for your statement. So what happened? I asked. I have nothing to say. I wasn't going to broadcast that I found my wife with another man. I just lay there and said nothing. Okay, it's your call. The doctor says you'll need to stay until tomorrow. Consider yourself fortunate no charges were pressed. You're lucky, Mr. Harper. The officer departed, leaving me with a pounding headache. What now? I couldn't bear the thought of living with a cheating wife, but I needed answers. I phoned my sister to pick me up the next day. I couldn't rely on Deb, not after this. As I waited for Amy to arrive, the phone rang. It was Deb. Should I come get you? We need to talk. Now that we're square. Square? What are you talking about? You cheated with Bob and you think we're even? Amy's on her way. I just want to grab my things and go. What do you mean leave? I was just evening the score for what you did, Deb retorted. I'm not discussing this over the phone. Amy and I will come to pick up my things, and we can talk then. I hung up and waited for Amy. She arrived shortly and drove to my house. I asked her to wait in the car to avoid any conflict. Knocking on the door, Deb answered. I inquired about the kids, and she mentioned they were at her mom's. Beginning the conversation, I addressed her response to my message. Did you listen to my voicemail? Yes, Sandy claimed you coerced her into having sex. How could you? I didn't do that. That's why I left the message. I went to fix her plumbing, and she made advances. I refused, but she persisted, threatening to lie to you about us. I don't believe you. She wouldn't lie to me. She's envious of our marriage and wanted to break us apart. Letting Bob sleep with you was part of their swinging lifestyle. They got what they wanted, and our marriage suffered. No, that's false. I did it for revenge. You assaulted my sister, so I slept with Bob to even the score. Sandy even knew physical details about you, like your uncircumcised state and the mole on your upper thigh. Your sister is promiscuous. She knew because I was involved with her in high school, like many others. I kept it from you because I liked you and didn't want to jeopardize our relationship. Then you said we should bury our past. I'm unsure what to believe. Sandy is my sister, and you're my husband. Instead of asking me, you let Bob, did you really think raping your sister would fix things? You must have wanted him badly to believe them. But Sandy's claims, I don't care what your sister says. It's not just about Bob. It's about you not trusting me enough to discuss the accusations. If I had assaulted her, why didn't she report it? She didn't want to cause a family scandal. But she had no qualms about involving the police last night. She didn't cry assault because it didn't happen. You can believe whoever, but this marriage is over. Why would you want to be with a rapist? No, you desired Bob and used me as an excuse. That's not true. I love you. Look up love. It doesn't involve sleeping with others. I'll grab my things now and see you next week for the rest. I'm consulting a lawyer Monday to start the divorce process. Ray, hold on. This isn't how it was planned. Sandy said she forgave you and you'd forgive me. I only wanted revenge. No, you slept with Bob and your sister. I grabbed my suitcase, packing a few things. What about the kids? Tell them what you want. I'm done with this. I'll arrange visits through a lawyer, and Amy can help with the kids. I don't want to speak to you again. I left. Amy drove me to a budget motel. On the way, I told her everything. She knew I was truthful. Weeks passed. It was tough. I worked extra for expenses, found a cheap place, and ate out mostly. In the divorce, assets were split equally. Child support didn't bother me. I love my kids. I missed Deb, but I knew it was over. I attended school events, avoiding Deb's family. I saw my kids weekly. Deb called often. I listened about the kids, but hung up when she brought up us. I visited Amy's for dinner and played with the kids. Sandy stuck to her story, leaving Deb torn. I had no proof. It was my word against Sandy's. Deb believed her, which hurt the most. One afternoon, the school called saying Kyle wasn't well. I fetched him and found he had a cold. I informed Deb, who taught middle school, and she said she'd come home soon. After checking Kyle's temperature, which was slightly elevated, I waited with him. An hour later, Debbie arrived. As she went to check on Kyle, the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered it was Sandy. What are you doing there? She asked. Well, look who's calling the shots. Kyle was sick, so I brought him home. Thanks for ruining our marriage. I recorded the conversation, forgetting the answering machine was on. Is he okay? Why do you care? You're the reason his parents split. Ray, things got out of hand. You knew we were wanton, and Bob wanted your wife. If you had just slept with me, none of this would have happened. But instead, you came home and started a fight. You accused me of assault and made Bob assault Deb. What kind of sister are you? Bob didn't force her. She willingly slept with him, and she'd probably do it again. She was drunk, and you filled her head with lies, then watched your husband violate her. Ray, you can't prove anything. I warned you Deb would believe me. If you need some action, call me. Tell Deb to ring me later. Hope Kyle feels better. She hung up, and I turned off the recorder. Debbie asked who called, and I told her it was Sandy, her angel sister who never lies. What'd she want? Deb asked. I recorded her message. She said to call her back. See you in court Thursday. I guess it's our Freedom Day. Don't forget to listen to the message, I said, heading to my truck. My phone rang persistently on the way home about 10 times. When I finally answered, it was Debbie, apologizing, claiming Sandy told her the truth about not being assaulted. Good to know, but it doesn't change my mind. You slept with Bob without giving me a chance to explain. Despite telling you the truth, you chose your sister's tale, thinking I was a rapist. I loved you, maybe always will, but I also hate you for what you did to our family and the distrust you had for me. On Thursday, I took 2 days off work, signed the divorce petition at my attorney's office, and left before Deb arrived. Depressed, I went to the neighborhood bar where I saw Bob. Without hesitation, I punched him repeatedly until I was pulled away by others. Dragged off by the police, I was taken to jail. I made one call, reaching out to my sister Amy. I confessed my actions and insisted she shouldn't post bail. I'd face my sentence. Tears flowed when we hung up. Debbie tried to visit me in prison, but I declined to see her. Nearly 2 months later, my case went to court. I pleaded guilty to assault and received a 2-year sentence, minus time served. Amy stored my belongings, informing me that Debbie was unwell and wished to see me. I refused. Deb truly loves you. Her family is furious about Sandy's accusations. Also, Debbie never showed up to sign the divorce papers, so legally you're still married, Amy informed me. Prison life was harsh, fights were routine, and I had to earn respect. My cellmate, Keeler, was a lifer with a violent past. Despite our rough start, he eventually opened up to me. Then, surprisingly, Debbie visited me one day. What brings you here? I questioned, feigning anger, though she looked lovely and tender. Ray, I still love you. I've made mistakes, she confessed, offering me photos of our kids, tears streaming down her face. I've moved on. Take care of our kids, I replied, receiving the pictures. I didn't finalize the divorce. I'll wait for you, no matter how long, she pleaded. I felt torn. Despite her mistakes, I still loved her. Leaving her by the window, I walked back to my cell. In the kitchen, I overheard plans to confront Keeler. Without being a snitch, I informed him, hoping to save a life. The next day, unsure if Keeler believed me, I stood my ground. He assured me he'd handle it discreetly, earning my gratitude. He concealed 2 books under his shirt, shielding his kidneys. Across from him, 3 allies sat at a nearby table. As the attacker approached and lunged with a knife, Keeler remained composed. The blade struck the books, its dullness preventing penetration. Keeler's comrade subdued the assailant until guards intervened. The attacker was isolated, while Keeler resumed his meal unfazed. It was astonishing how Keeler remained composed. He confided in me regularly after the incident. Despite his tough exterior, he was a different person behind bars. Keeler inquired about my family, sharing his own story of estrangement. His daughter, Angie, remained loyal, though he protected her from prison life. He cherished her deeply, proud of her career as a lawyer. I recounted my ordeal with Sandy and Debbie to Keeler. Do you still love her? He asked. Yes, but I can't forgive her, I replied. Keeler urged me not to hold on to grudges, sharing his own regrets. His words left me pondering my future upon release. Without a job or family, what would I do? The following month, Debbie visited me again, her eyes teary but smiling. She handed me drawings from the kids, portraying us as a family. They miss you, Ray, and I miss you terribly. Can you forgive me? Can we rebuild our family? I've cut ties with Sandy and Bob. I regret not trusting you, she confessed. Doubt lingered. Would she believe me if faced with accusations again? Deb, I want to forgive you, but it's hard. Seeing you with Bob is etched in my mind. Did you have feelings for him? No, I despised it. I felt sick when you walked in. I regret my actions deeply. I only want you, Ray, the father of our children, she pleaded. Weeks later, Amy visited with unsettling news. I saw Sandy and Bob together at the house. I don't know why. I thought you should know. Confusion swirled. Had Deb lied again? I was ready to forgive, but now I doubted her honesty. I needed to understand why Deb was reconnecting with Sandy and Bob. A month later, Keeler and I spoke, and he expressed gratitude for my past help. A former lawyer, he offered to leverage his connections to potentially secure my release from parole. Though uncertain, I trusted him. Keeler's integrity stood firm, despite his criminal background. I respected his stature and refrained from probing further, choosing to accept his word. A few weeks later, I was summoned to the warden's office for the parole board meeting. The prison governor was the first to address me. "Mr. Harper, we have a parole application for you. After reviewing your file, we noted your initial struggle to adjust. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I found prison life challenging, but I tried to adapt." "If released early, where would you live and work?" the governor asked. I had to think quickly, realizing the importance of my response. "Well, sir, my sister and her husband offered me a place to stay, and my previous employer expressed willingness to rehire me." "Aren't you married, Mr. Harper?" "Yes, sir, but we were in the process of divorce when I was sentenced. I'm uncertain about our future." "We appreciate your candor. We knew about your marital status and wanted to gauge your honesty. Regarding recidivism, we're cautious about early releases. I assure you I'm committed to staying out of prison. Return to your cell, Mr. Harper. We'll notify you of our decision by month's end." "Thank you, sir, for considering my parole." Back in the cell, Keeler inquired about the meeting. I shared my responses and asked if he had any involvement. "You never know, but if you're released early, I'll expect a weekly box of cigarettes on my account." He chuckled. A few days later, Debbie returned, mentioning a parole board representative had visited. "Are you getting paroled?" she inquired anxiously. "What did they say?" I nervously questioned. "They asked about our living arrangements and if you'd be staying here," she replied, adding, "I'd love to have you back." Changing the subject, I queried about her interactions with Sandy and Bob. "She's my sister. I don't see her much," she responded defensively. "And Bob?" I pressed. "Why all the questions?" she retorted, visibly uneasy. "You promised not to see Sandy, yet they were here together. Did something happen with Bob again?" "Tell him when I'm out, I'll settle things. And if you're having fun with him in the meantime, I'll deal with it," I asserted. Deb hastily exited the room, confirming my suspicions. I phoned my sister Amy, informing her of the encounter. She assured me of her support. "Did the parole board contact Mr. Parker about my job?" I inquired. "Yes, they did. He said you could return. You were one of his top employees," she reassured. "You've given me hope," I acknowledged gratefully. "They mentioned I'm likely to be released next month, considering I have a place to live and a job," she added tearfully. Amy's words buoyed my spirits. I received a call informing me of my upcoming release next week. They provided the name of the lawyer handling my case and instructed me to report to the agency promptly after my release. It puzzled me why I had to meet with a lawyer instead of a parole officer. However, I learned that the law firm facilitated my release, handling paperwork, explaining my parole terms, and arranging a meeting with a parole officer. I expressed gratitude to Keeler, remembering our agreement about the cigarettes. Regardless of his involvement in my parole, the prospect of freedom was worth a weekly box of cigarettes. As I stepped outside the gate, my sister Amy awaited me, tearfully. We shared a hug and a brotherly kiss. Inside Amy's house, her husband welcomed me warmly. Amy mentioned that Debbie, after consulting with a lawyer while I was incarcerated, had initiated the divorce proceedings. It seemed my suspicions about Deb were confirmed, yet now I was a free man. Knowing I needed to arrange visitation with my kids, I called Deb's house beforehand to ensure she was available. I clarified that I sought no trouble and suggested we discuss arrangements on her porch. Reluctantly, she agreed, warning of involving the police if there was any disturbance. As I arrived at the house, my children rushed to me, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, you're back!" I embraced them tightly, feeling the depth of my longing for them. After a brief chat, I urged them to ride their bikes, recalling how their mother and I used to watch them from the porch. "Debbie, these kids are mine too. I want to be a part of their lives," I asserted, frustrated by her dismissive attitude. I was willing to forgive. But you went back to Bob and Sandy." "I won't tolerate exposing my children to their lifestyle," I warned sternly, emphasizing the seriousness of my intent. Debbie insisted she wouldn't subject the kids to that lifestyle and claimed she had changed. "Actions speak louder than words," I reminded her skeptically. After bidding my kids farewell, I discussed their well-being and promised to spend more time with them once I found a nearby apartment. As I left, a sense of unease settled over me, knowing I needed legal guidance in this complex situation. I hadn't spoken to the lawyer who secured my parole. Approaching the receptionist, I presented the card from the parole board. "May I see Mr. A.J. Brady, please? I have an appointment." "I'm Ray Harper," I stated. The receptionist assured me Brady would see me shortly and directed me to take a seat. While waiting, I wondered if she had said, "Miss Brady." The card indicated a J. Brady, so I assumed it was a man. Lost in thought, I was taken aback when a stunning woman in a dark blue suit approached. She greeted me with a smile, dimples, and shoulder-length dark hair. As she extended her hand for a handshake, she introduced herself as a J. Brady. "Ray Harper, I presume?" she said. "I've been asked to review your case. From what I've gathered, you didn't receive fair representation. Let's discuss further in my office," she added, instructing the receptionist to hold calls. "Yes, Miss Brady," the receptionist responded. I followed her into her office. If she had asked, I would have followed her anywhere. She was strikingly beautiful. "Well, Mr. Harper, we finally meet," she said. "Please call me Ray," I replied gratefully. "I owe you my life, but I'm curious, why me?" "A friend of mine asked me to look into your case," she explained. "Your lawyer failed to mention key details like your recent divorce and extenuating circumstances. I presented these to the parole board, who agreed your sentence was excessive." "Why me, Miss Brady? Who hired you? Can I call you a J?" I inquired. "Look, Ray, a friend asked for my help, and I delivered. Knowing who hired me isn't crucial, and yes, you can call me a J," she replied. "There are some things we need to discuss," she added. "Would you join me for lunch?" I asked. "I don't usually meet clients outside the office," she replied. "It's not a date, just lunch," I clarified. "All right, Ray, let's call it a business meeting over lunch," she agreed, flashing a smile. "I'll let Mary know we're leaving, and then we can go." I watched her rise. She exuded a rare blend of charm and professionalism for a lawyer. We dined at a tranquil restaurant. Over lunch, she briefed me on meeting my parole officer, regular visits, adherence to rules, and staying clear of trouble. "Angie, share something about yourself," I requested. "Ray, discussing my personal life with a client wouldn't be appropriate," she responded. "Your smile is captivating," I complimented, prompting her to blush. "Tell me about your legal background," I persisted. She revealed her scholarship, acquired law degree, and experience in criminal law. As we ate, Angie lingered in my thoughts. "Will I see you again?" I inquired. "Return next week for paperwork with your parole officer. We can have lunch then," she agreed, softening slightly. After lunch, we returned to the office. When she extended her hand, I held it briefly, pondering her thoughts. We bid farewell, and I eagerly anticipated our next lunch. Her secretary's smile hinted at the rarity of such interactions, a testament to Angie's uniqueness. I returned to work, swiftly completing tasks as if it were second nature. My colleagues seemed to regard me with newfound respect, and no one dared to challenge me. For 2 consecutive Mondays, I met with Angie, initially maintaining a professional relationship. However, by the 4th week, she informed me that our business collaboration had ceased. "Are you still my lawyer?" I inquired. "Certainly. Call me if you encounter any issues," she assured. "Angie, I regret to inform you that I must terminate our arrangement," I confessed. "Terminate, after all I've done to assist you?" she exclaimed. "Yes. I desire more than a professional connection. I want to take you on a genuine date, get to know you better," I expressed. "Ray, I'm conflicted. There's an attraction, but what will people think?" she pondered. "I don't care about perceptions. Just join me once. If it doesn't feel right, we won't repeat it." "Let's follow our hearts," I urged. After hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. "I'll go, but don't expect anything more," she cautioned. Surprised by her own words, Angie agreed. On Saturday, we took a drive. I borrowed a car from my sister, opting not to use my old truck. Arriving at her townhouse, I was greeted by a stunning woman as she opened the door. Despite individual perceptions, to me, she appeared breathtaking. Resisting the urge to embrace her immediately, I reminded myself to act as a gentleman, though it wasn't easy. At a fancy restaurant, we enjoyed wine followed by dinner. Afterward, we conversed while listening to music. "Angie, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? I noticed your last name differs from your father's," I inquired. "You know my story, Ray. My parents' relationship was troubled, ending in my father's incarceration for the past 14 years. Raised by extended family, I, the youngest, was only 14 when it all unfolded. It was a difficult time. Despite loving him, my siblings couldn't forgive our father for his actions. I harbored guilt for revealing my mother's infidelity to him. Perhaps if I had stayed silent, things might have been different," Angie confessed. "Angie, you shouldn't blame yourself for your mom's deceit or your dad's imprisonment. You were just a child trying to do the right thing," I reassured her. "After my father was incarcerated, I resolved to attend college and pursue a career in law, hoping to assist him with a lighter sentence. That's why I specialized in criminal law. Despite my efforts, there wasn't much I could do for him," Angie explained. "As for your question about my marital status, I wasn't married long, and it's not something I want to discuss," she replied with a smile. "Ray, can we table this conversation for another time? I'm enjoying our evening together, and I'd rather not dwell on these topics. Would you like to dance? She suggested. I'm not much of a dancer, but I'd love to hold you close, I responded. As we danced, I embraced Angie, cherishing the moment. Ray, I have trust issues, especially with men, due to my social circles. I'm just being upfront with you. If it weren't for my father's intervention, I might not have agreed to this date, Angie admitted. I'll make sure to send your father some extra cigarettes, I joked. Angie, you mean a lot to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. If I overstep, just let me know, and I'll respect your boundaries, I promised. When I dropped her off that night, I kissed her at the door, leaving her in silence. She kissed me again and leaned back. Can I come in, Angie? Not today, Ray. It's too soon. Maybe next Saturday. That could work. Give me a call on Thursday. I returned home filled with happiness. We got together the next 2 Saturdays. During our time together, she opened up more. Ray, I want you to know me better if we're going to keep seeing each other. I won't hide anything. I've been married before, as I mentioned. It happened during my freshman year of college. My boyfriend and I thought we were in love, so we got married after I got pregnant. But we soon realized we were too young, and the marriage failed. I had a miscarriage, and we ended up divorcing. I kept the last name Brady to distance myself from my maiden name, Miller, as my father insisted. I felt relieved that she trusted me with her story. She asked about my kids, expressing interest in meeting them. I had already told them about her, and my daughter was eager to meet her. Angie, would you like to join us? My sister is hosting a family barbecue next Saturday, and you're invited. It would mean a lot to me if you came. I knew it was a significant step for us. She avoided eye contact, indicating she understood the importance of this invitation. After a deep breath, she looked at me and kissed me passionately, a first for us. Pulling back, she took another breath. Okay, Ray, I'll come. What can I bring? I wasn't sure what women typically brought to these gatherings, so I suggested Amy could discuss it with her. When I informed Amy about Angie attending the party, the guest list expanded. Everyone wanted to meet her. My parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all showed up. Angie offered to make potato salad. Amy mentioned how sweet Angie sounded on the phone, hinting at her hopes for our relationship. Every weekend, I visited Deb's house to pick up my kids. We'd either hang out at Amy's or do something fun together. I asked about their mother respectfully. Kyle mentioned she was dating a man, which concerned me initially, but Kayla reassured me he was their school teacher named Pat. He had lost his wife to leukemia and had moved to start anew. He had a daughter their age, whom Kyle and Kayla liked. I need to tell you something, Deb. Your deceit and infidelity destroyed us. If you value this man, treat him right. Most importantly, be truthful with him. Don't repeat the same mistakes you made with us.
Pat cares for our children and treats them well.
He's aware of your existence and acknowledges you as their father. I hope things work out for us. I hope I haven't tarnished your future relationships, Ray. You're a decent man, and I believe you'll find the right partner. I'm just sorry for the pain I caused you, Deb said, sounding sincere. After bidding farewell, I drove home. I rented a small apartment about a mile from Deb and the kids. I opted for a 2-bedroom place so the kids would have a spot when they were with me. I still swung by Amy's a couple of times a week, usually for a meal, but I enjoyed visiting them too. As the barbecue day arrived, I felt anxious. Waiting outside, I felt immense relief seeing Angie's car pull up. She greeted me with a smile, offering a bowl of potato salad. Make sure to have some, she teased. She looked stunning. I couldn't see her any other way. Being with her made me feel elated. I realized I had fallen for her, even though we'd only shared kisses. Some things you just know. I hoped she felt something for me too. Introducing her as my good friend, I watched as she mingled with everyone. Mom and Dad instantly took a liking to her. Dad even quipped, "Don't let her get away, Ray. We already adore her and we barely know her." Angie glanced at me and smiled. When I introduced her to Amy, their mutual glance seemed like positive reinforcement. Ray, I never mentioned this, but I encountered your sister during the parole interviews. I didn't bring it up as it wasn't relevant until now. I never anticipated we'd become acquaintances. I assured you of my honesty, which is why I'm disclosing this now. Amy and I hadn't communicated since your parole until she contacted me about the potato salad, Angie explained. Have you conversed with anyone else I should be aware of? Yes, I've spoken to Deb, your ex-wife Sandy, and Bob naturally. Additionally, I liaised with your employer to secure your position considering those involved in the bar incident and your arrest. I handled all of this as your legal representative. I never foresaw developing feelings for you, especially without meeting. I regret not divulging this earlier, but as your attorney, I needed to ascertain the truth before fully supporting you. If you want me to depart, please say so, and I'll oblige. Leave? Leave. All I heard was your declaration of love for me. I embraced her with a kiss, followed by a hug, and then introduced her to the rest of the family. I informed Angie I'd return shortly, as I needed to pick up the kids who were eager to meet her. Upon my return, Kayla approached and introduced herself to Angie. Hi, I'm Kayla. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? You're really pretty, just like Daddy said. Hi, Kayla. You can call me Angie or AJ. You're a very pretty girl, too. It's really nice to meet you. Kayla then said, Come meet my older brother. He's 10 and a bit shy around girls. Kyle, this is AJ, Daddy's friend. I observed Kyle shaking Angie's hand. She knelt down to chat with the kids at their level. The way they interacted indicated they were likely to become friends. I joined them, and Kyle, not typically talkative, told me, We like her, Daddy. She's so pretty and sweet. Angie simply glanced at me and smiled. The barbecue was fantastic. As the evening progressed, while chatting with Angie, Kyle and Kayla approached us. Dad, remember you mentioned going to the amusement park in 2 weeks? Can Angie come with us? That way, when Kayla and I ride the attractions, you'll have someone to talk to. I attempted to convey to Kyle that such inquiries should be made in private. Angie might have other commitments or might not enjoy amusement parks. He glanced at Angie and apologized. Sorry, Angie, I didn't realize you weren't fond of amusement parks. Angie chuckled and knelt down, addressing Kyle. Sweetheart, what your daddy means is that those questions are better asked to him privately, not me. As for amusement parks, I adore them and would love to go if it's all right with your daddy. Perhaps you and I can enjoy the roller coaster together. Sure enough, we all headed to the amusement park, where the kids eagerly rode every attraction. Angie kept her promise to Kyle and rode the roller coaster with him, as well as the Ferris wheel. On our way back, Kayla remarked, Dad, you should get a car instead of your truck. Angie can't always use hers. We won't all fit in your truck. We chuckled at Kayla's observation, realizing she was correct. Over the following weeks, I didn't see much of Angie. Work kept me busy on weekends, and she had court obligations. Although we spoke on the phone occasionally, it wasn't the same. One Saturday, I picked up the kids, and we decided to visit Chuck E. Cheese's, a pizza place with various games and prizes. After arriving home, Kayla asked if she could invite Angie to join us. Not wanting to disappoint her, I agreed to call Angie. Angie, I called out. It's Ray. Kayla wanted me to give you a call. Any plans for tonight? Oh, hey, Ray. I was going out with some friends. Oh, okay. Have a great time then. Ray, you mentioned Kayla wanted to talk to me. Can you put her on the line, please? It's all right, Angie. Sure, that'd be nice. Could you pass the phone to Kayla? I could only hear one side of the conversation. Hey, Angie. Dad's taking Kyle and me to Chuck E. Cheese's for pizza and games. We thought you might want to join us. Yeah? Okay, I'll let him know. We miss you too. All right, bye. I felt bad for Kayla. I'm sorry, honey, but Angie already has plans. What do you mean, Dad? She said she'd be here in half an hour. She mentioned she's getting a car, so she doesn't always have to use hers. Yeah, Daddy. She said she misses us. Later that evening, after we returned from a pizza party where the kids won a bunch of stuffed animals thanks to Angie's skills at the games, I dropped them off at their mom's house. Angie expressed her desire for us to get to know each other better. We headed to my apartment and settled on the couch. Angie, you know I care about you, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I want to be engaged with you. I haven't trusted a man in a long time. All I ask is for you to be gentle and caring. I don't want to feel used. I want to feel loved. We began on the couch and eventually moved to the bedroom, indulging in whatever pleased us. I pampered her feet with massages, licked whipped cream off her stomach, and explored every sensation. We spent hours caressing, massaging, and expressing our love. Holding her in my arms after making love was when I felt most content. It was comforting to cuddle and feel her close to me, something I hadn't experienced in a long while. She ended up staying the entire night. I rose before her and prepared French toast for us. Emerging from the bedroom, she wore one of my t-shirts, which looked particularly fetching on her. I couldn't help but express my admiration for how wonderful she looked, even in the morning. After a quick shower, we sat down to talk. Angie, what do you envision for our future? You know how much I love you, and my children and family adore you. What are your thoughts on what comes next? Ray, I feel like I'm sounding like a lawyer. We've only known each other for a few months, and last night was our first time making love. I understand it's early, but I want you in my life every day. If we haven't had our fill of love, we can return to the bedroom and spend the whole day there. Angie smiled at the suggestion. Angie, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Angie's eyes. Ray, I want you to know I don't take love lightly. I've made mistakes before, as I've told you. Yes, I will marry you. I promise to always be there for you and the kids. I know the pain of your past marriage, and I vow to be honest and faithful. I expect the same from you." She leaned in and kissed me passionately. "Honey, what's on your mind?" "You seem happy yet sad," I inquired. "These are my reflections on my dad and how joyful he will be." Many young girls dream of their special wedding day, envisioning themselves in a white dress escorted down the aisle by their father to meet their future spouse. I realize that won't be my reality, and it saddens me deeply. She shed quiet tears. Last time, my father wasn't even aware of my wedding. By the time I reached out to him, I had suffered a miscarriage and was on the path to divorce. I'm sorry, Ray. I shouldn't dwell on this now. After all, I'm marrying the man my father approves of, the one I've loved since our first meeting. What, you loved me from the start? I've wanted you since I laid eyes on you, but I guess you already knew that, I remarked, surprised. She gave me a sweet smile and asked when I wanted to set the date. I responded that it was entirely up to her. We both agreed it should happen as soon as possible. I asked if I could start spreading the news, and she said she would do the same. We just needed to settle on a date. We settled on 2 months from then. For the next few days, I was elated. I shared the news with Amy and her husband, Kenny, who were thrilled for us. I needed to inform the kids. I called their home and connected with them both through the console so I could share the news simultaneously. They both exclaimed their happiness and expressed their fondness for Angie. I assured them it was happening in a couple of months and that they were among the first to know. When I entered Angie's office, her secretary Mary congratulated me. She informed me that Angie had already spread the news, invited everyone to the wedding reception. Mary then called Angie and beckoned me in. Angie was waiting, tears silently streaming down her face. "What's wrong, Angie?" I called the prison, spoke to the warden, and requested a day's leave for my dad to attend our wedding. He informed me that my dad is prohibited from leaving the prison under any circumstances. His life sentence is final. He expressed regret but said there was nothing he could do. "I'm deeply sorry, Angie. I understand how much your father's presence means to you." "It's deteriorating, Ray. Despite being in remission, Dad's cancer has resurfaced. He has 3 to 6 months left." Tears welled in her eyes, and I enveloped her in my arms. "Why, Lord? Why put her through this? She's a good soul." My heart ached for her. "Angie, I've been buying cigarettes for your dad since I got out. It was a deal between us, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Dad doesn't smoke anymore. He uses the packs sent to him to trade with other inmates." "You didn't cause his cancer," Angie assured. An idea sparked in my mind, but I hesitated to share it with Angie, not wanting to extinguish her hope. I kissed her goodbye, promising to see her the next day. I skipped work and headed to the prison to meet Keeler and the warden. Keeler greeted me with a smile. "You take care of my girl, Ray. Just make her happy. She deserves better than what life's thrown her way." I pitched my idea to Keeler, met with initial resistance, but eventually secured his agreement, pending the warden's approval. I bid him farewell, heading to the warden's office. The warden welcomed me. "Well, Ray, I see you're staying composed and getting hitched. Sorry about Keeler, but as a lifer, we can't release him for his daughter's wedding." "Warden, are you fully in charge here, making most decisions? What's your angle, Ray? Can we hold the wedding on the prison premises? Use the chapel, and Keeler can walk his daughter down the aisle."
You want to marry here in prison just so her father can attend?
"Is that it?" "Yes, sir. She hasn't seen him in over 14 years, and he's nearing the end of the road. We only need the chapel for the ceremony. I know weddings have happened here before." "All right, Ray. I'll arrange it. Keep it small. You can invite 3 guests besides yourselves. Let Keeler bring some fellow inmates. You'll need a prison attendant." I expressed gratitude to the warden and hurried back to Keeler. "Dave," I called him by name, and he chuckled. The warden greenlighted the plan. "I'm off to tell Angie." "Thanks, Dave. It means the world to her." He smiled. "Ray, jot down this number," Keeler said, handing me a note. I noted it down for Angie. "When you visit the bank, ask Angie to bring her birth certificate. The account is registered under her maiden name," Keeler instructed. I expressed sympathy for Dave's illness. "Just look after my little girl. That's all I ask," he responded. Returning to Angie's office, she noticed my smile and inquired, "What's happening?" "You don't mind getting married in prison, do you?" I questioned. What's this about, Ray?" I recounted my conversation with the warden, mentioning that her father would be permitted to walk her down the aisle. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. "God, I love you, Ray." I informed her about the safety deposit box, and we proceeded to inspect its contents. "I'm Angelina Juanita Miller, and I'd like to access my safety deposit box," Angie informed the attendant, who examined her birth certificate. He escorted us to the safe deposit box, unlocked it, and exited the room. The first thing we noticed was a note from her father. "Dear Angie, if you're opening this box, it means you're either getting married or I've already passed away. I hope it's the former. In the little box is your mother's engagement ring. I know everyone wondered where it went, but I put it here for safekeeping. I want you to have it and wear it with pride. Your mother had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she would want you to have her wedding ring. There are also bonds here totaling over $115,000 that will help pay for your wedding. I formalized them before I was sent away. When you see your brother and sister, tell them there's a box for each of them too. If they haven't gotten theirs yet, only yours has a ring in it. Congratulations, and always be honest with your husband. With love, Daddy." Angie and I discussed our wedding plans, opting to invite her brother Brad and sister Lisa, along with my sister Amy. We planned to extend invitations to family and friends for the reception scheduled shortly after the ceremony. Angie and Amy dedicated the following month to preparing for the event, though it incurred additional expenses due to the short notice. However, I was determined to fulfill as much of Angie's dream as possible. Amy volunteered to capture the event with her digital camera. We visited Angie's siblings, where she introduced me to them. They clarified that while they didn't harbor animosity toward their father, they disapproved of his actions. Angie explained the significance of the wedding and the circumstances surrounding it, leading Brad and Lisa to tears upon learning of their father's terminal condition. After agreeing to attend, Angie provided them with their bank deposit box numbers, revealing their father's unexpected provisions. On the wedding day, Angie and I drove to the prison together, accompanied by Amy and her husband, who waited in the car. Upon our arrival, I arranged for a suit for Keeler, delivered by a guard, while I donned a rented tuxedo. Amy assisted Angie with her wedding attire in another room, as Angie preferred I not see her until the ceremony. Inside the chapel, I awaited Angie's entrance, alongside Brad and Lisa, who would serve as my best man and Angie's maid of honor, respectively. A prisoner played the piano, setting a solemn atmosphere, while additional prisoners, friends of Keeler, Dave, were seated. The warden, accompanied by the priest, announced refreshments after the ceremony, displaying unexpected kindness. As "Here Comes the Bride" filled the chapel, everyone rose to their feet. Angie entered, escorted by her father, tears streaming down both their faces. Angie's wish had been granted. Her father would walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. Once they reached the front, the audience took their seats, leaving only the small wedding party standing. Another guard entered and shut the door. The priest inquired, "Who presents this woman to marry this man?" "Yes, sir," Dave responded proudly before taking his seat. "Angelina Juanita Miller Brady. Do you accept Raymond Michael Harper as your husband?" the priest asked, proceeding with the ceremony. He posed the same question to me. We both solemnly affirmed our commitment to love and cherish each other from that day forward. After exchanging vows, I kissed the bride. Angie then embraced and kissed her father. We adjourned to an adjoining room to chat briefly and partake in cake and punch provided by the warden. Brad and Lisa approached their father, embracing him for the first time in nearly 15 years. Tears flowed, mingling joy with remorse. Aware of their father's terminal condition, they sought to reaffirm their love for him. Amy documented moments throughout the ceremony, capturing heartfelt interactions among Dave and his children. Her photos, encompassing tears, embraces, and even some laughter, were swiftly developed and enlarged at a 24-hour photo center. Expressing gratitude to Dave and the warden for fulfilling Angie's wish, we bid them farewell. As we departed, Brad and Lisa were still engaged in conversation with their father, a heartening sight. Returning to town for the reception, we were greeted enthusiastically by all our invited guests. Kyle and Kayla eagerly embraced us upon our arrival, their excitement palpable. Entering the auditorium, we were met with jubilant cheers. Tears welled in the eyes of my parents and nearly everyone who greeted us. Angie's friends, many unfamiliar to me, also welcomed us warmly. Notably, Mary approached, offering hugs of congratulations. Around 30 minutes later, Amy arrived with the photographs. She enlarged several of them and laid them out on a table for everyone to view. Brad and Lisa stopped by to collect their families. Brad was accompanied by his wife and 2 children, while Lisa was with her husband and 3 children. They all gathered around Dave's picture, explaining to the kids that he was their grandfather. Amy informed them that she had taken 4 sets of photos, and after the reception, each family would receive 1 set to take home. There was one for Brad and Lisa, one for Angie and me, and naturally, one for Amy. I must mention how stunning Angie looked in her wedding gown. If she had wings, she would have resembled an angel sent by God. She was the most exquisite woman I had ever seen, and now she was my wife. I believe most men feel similarly about their wives, We danced, dined, and danced some more, accompanied by the clinking of glasses. Our lips were practically inseparable throughout the evening. Colleagues at work told me I was incredibly fortunate, but trust me, I didn't need to be reminded. I knew I had found something precious, and I intended to cherish it forever. For those curious, Deb and Pat were absent from our wedding. It was Angie's special day, and I wanted nothing to mar it. Witnessing her and her father walking down the aisle, seeing her brother and sister reconcile with their father, and witnessing the family coming together once more, these are moments I will never forget. Update: it's been 6 months since our wedding. Debbie and Pat tied the knot last month. I'm glad to see Debbie making a genuine effort to turn her life around. My kids report that Pat is treating them well. I inquired about Aunt Sandy and Uncle Bob, and my kids informed me they relocated to another state. I transitioned to the day shift to spend more time with the kids and be home with Angie every night. Angie became pregnant with our baby 3 months after our wedding. Dave Keeler passed away. The kids visited him monthly until his passing. It was a somber moment, but we were able to share the news of Angie's pregnancy with him. We informed him it was a boy, and we planned to name him David Raymond. That brought a smile to Dave's face, reflecting on everything: the betrayal of my cheating wife, meeting the woman of my dreams in prison, and marrying her. I realize I'm starting anew and preparing to become a father once more. Not a day passes without me thanking God for all I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity He's given Angie and me to find happiness again. That's all.
I've been getting closer to my stepson lately, something I never imagined would happen. I became a divorcee just a year into my marriage. It turned out my ex-husband had been seeing someone else all along, and I was the only one in the dark. He had been with his girlfriend for a long time, but his family opposed their relationship. Unaware of all this, I happily went ahead with the marriage. I never snooped on his phone when we were dating. It just seemed natural for a man and woman of marriageable age to meet and start a family. However, problems started surfacing during our honeymoon. My husband kept stepping out, and when he returned after a while, his expression was bitter. I would have understood if he just went out for a smoke, but his demeanor was unusually gloomy for a newlywed, and he wasn't affectionate towards me at all. It turned out he had another woman, and he was in contact with her not only on our wedding day, but also the days following. I confronted him quietly, asking if this was how he intended to live, questioning if anyone could see him as a man who had just started a new family. He was indifferent. Yeah, I don't think I can forget her. He agreed to a divorce without any fuss, and without any regrets, I packed my bags and left. Since then, I had trouble trusting men. Although it's gotten better, there was a tendency to look down on divorcees. So, I never mentioned that I was a divorcee or that I lived alone unless asked. I didn't open up about my situation unless someone inquired. But there was something different about the man I was introduced to later. At least, he didn't seem like he would cause trouble over another woman. I met him in my early 40s. He was raising a college-aged son. His son was also gentle and handsome. When I got divorced, I was in my late 20s, a time when many of my college friends were getting married and starting families. Looking back, I experienced both marriage and divorce during what many consider the prime years of one's life. It wasn't until over a decade later, in my early 40s, that I met my current husband. He was a divorced man raising his son alone. His voice alone conveyed his kindness, and he had a friendly and welcoming demeanor. However, I soon discovered that, much like my first husband, he had a weakness for the attention of other women. This repeated issue caused me considerable stress, leading me to regret my decision to remarry. Despite my disappointment in my second husband's inability to resist other women, I found solace in my stepson, who respectfully called me Mom and did not follow in his father's footsteps. He was a bright college student, cheerful and insightful, which made me proud of how well he was raised, seemingly in spite of his father's example. Initially, our relationship was somewhat awkward, since I became his stepmother when he was a freshman in college. However, he grew on me as he shared memories while looking through photo albums, watched TV with me, and prepared late-night snacks when his father came home late. His attentive behavior made me feel wanted in the household, and over time, my fondness for him evolved, confusingly seeing him as more than just a stepson. Despite these feelings, I reminded myself of the impossibility of them. As a successful freelancer, I was financially independent and didn't need to rely on a man, but I couldn't bear the thought of hurting my stepson, who had come to see me as a mother figure. My son once mentioned while looking through an album, "Mom left us for some reason when I was deep in my teenage years." He still doesn't understand why his mom decided to divorce. It was clear he craved a stable family environment, and I could see his lips quiver slightly when he spoke about his mom. Knowing how much he longed for her presence, I thought it was right to divorce my current husband, but I decided to hang in there a bit longer. From the day I visited, my son held my hand and said, "Mom, let's get along well," which was both touching and heart-wrenching. Despite being an adult, he still harbored insecurities, and I resolved to make our relationship work. My husband's constant late nights caused a lot of stress, and I grew tired of bringing up his issues and arguing. His blatant late returns became more frequent, to the point where I no longer saw him as a partner. When my son applied for a student exchange program and began studying languages, I felt I had no reason to stay in this house without him, yet the thought of him leaving was deeply saddening. I couldn't get angry at my husband's insincere late returns anymore, but I couldn't bear to hurt my son, who chatted away beside me as I prepared meals. I decided to foster a closer relationship with my son, and oddly enough, alcohol played its part well. As my son got busy with language school, I made special snacks to encourage him. "Son, let's have a beer." "I've got wedge fries today," I said, and he came running in light clothes, massaging my shoulders. We spent the night together until late, while my husband was away on a supposed on-night, 2-day workshop, which I hardly cared whether was true or not. Being remarried and lying alone in a large bed felt lonely, but spending time with my son felt truly wonderful. He said in a shy voice, "Mom, this is a first for me, too," which I replied, "Mom doesn't know much about men either, just got older," as I stroked his back. Since that day, I've been unable to let go of my son's reaching hand. Thinking about him leaving for a foreign country next month brings tears to my eyes unreasonably. He might study there and even meet a woman to marry. Lately, I've been speaking to him in formal language. At first, he was surprised, but soon he listened attentively with a proud face. To be parting ways with such a thoughtful and deep son. I have no words if you find it suffocating, because he was the first man who truly reached out to me. Saying goodbye seems incredibly hard. My son, who filled my life of betrayal with smiles, is indeed my true husband.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
When Lana and I moved to this quiet suburban patch of Ohio 7 years ago, I never thought life would settle into such a steady rhythm. It's the kind of place where the mornings hum with the sound of sprinklers, the evenings carry the faint scent of barbecue, and the nights are so still you can hear the crickets from the next yard over. My job as a production manager at the auto plant keeps me busy during the week, while Lana takes care of things at home. She's got this effortless way of making our house feel warm and welcoming. Her baking, her knack for picking out the perfect throw pillow, the little details I wouldn't even think of. We've got good neighbors, too. Ben and Brenda live just across the street. Brenda's been Lana's friend since they were kids, and it's clear their bond runs deep. The two of them can spend hours on the porch, laughing over coffee or reminiscing about old times. Remember that time in middle school when you cut your bangs and thought you looked like a supermodel? Brenda teased one morning as they sat on our porch swing. "Oh, shut up, Brenda." Lana shot back, though she couldn't hide her grin. "At least I didn't wear neon leg warmers to every single school dance." "Hey now, neon was in," Brenda protested. "Sure, if you were trying to be a traffic cone," Lana quipped, and they both burst into laughter. Ben and I get along just fine, too, though our conversations are less animated. We talk shop sometimes. He's in logistics, swap tips on lawn care, or just shoot the breeze over a couple of beers. "Still struggling with that patch by the mailbox?" Ben asked me last Saturday. "Yeah, I think the soil's just cursed," I replied, shaking my head. "Lana's ready to throw in the towel and plant fake grass." "Smart woman," Ben said with a chuckle, raising his bottle in a mock toast. Things were comfortable, predictable even, until a few weeks ago when Lana told me her friend Maria was moving into the neighborhood. "She bought that little white house down the street, the one with the blue shutters," Lana said one evening as we were finishing dinner. I looked up from my plate. "Maria, from college, right?" "Yeah, that's her. Can you believe it? She's been looking for a place closer to family, and this one just popped up." "Huh," I said, trying to sound neutral. Lana's told me plenty of stories about Maria over the years, enough to know she's got a big personality. "She's a bit much," I ventured carefully. Lana shot me a look. "She's fun, Kevin, and she's been through a lot lately. It'll be nice for her to have us close by." I nodded, letting it go. If Lana was excited, that was good enough for me. Besides, it might be nice to mix things up a bit. And so, last week, Maria pulled up in a moving truck, a whirlwind of energy in oversized sunglasses and a bright red scarf. "Well, look who's finally joining the suburbs." Lana greeted her with open arms. "Oh, honey, you know I couldn't resist being near my two best girls," Maria said dramatically, pulling Brenda into the hug as well. "And Kevin, of course," she added with a wink in my direction. "Glad to have you," I said, shaking her hand. Maria's arrival was bound to add a little color to our quiet street. The three of them, Lana, Brenda, and Maria, were already plotting their first girls' night out as we stood there on the driveway. "She's going to keep things lively around here," Brenda said later as we walked back to our respective houses. "That's one way to put it," I muttered, earning a laugh from Ben. And just like that, Maria was part of our little world, settling into her new home in the same neighborhood. When Lana told me Maria was moving into the neighborhood, I'd had my doubts, but I kept them to myself. I figured, how bad could it be? People change, right? But the moment I met her again, standing on our driveway with her oversized sunglasses and that too bright red scarf, the old feelings came rushing back. Something about Maria just didn't sit right with me, never had. That evening, as Lana and I were cleaning up after dinner, I finally decided to say something. "Listen," I started, drying the plates as Lana handed them to me. "About Maria. What about her?" Lana didn't look up, focused on scrubbing the pan. I hesitated. "I don't know. She just gives me bad vibes. Always has." Lana paused and looked over her shoulder at me, raising an eyebrow. "Bad vibes? Kevin, that's ridiculous. Maria's had a tough life." "I'm not saying she hasn't," I replied, "but there's something off about her. I can't explain it. And you know me. I don't usually feel this way about people." Lana sighed and went back to scrubbing. "She's been through a lot. 3 divorces, Kevin. 3. And now she's decided not to get married again. She's just trying to find some peace in her life." "Maybe she's the problem," I said bluntly. "I mean, come on, Lana. If you can't get it right the second time, maybe don't try for a third." Lana spun around, hands on her hips, her expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. "That's unfair, Kevin. You don't know what she's been through. People aren't perfect. Relationships aren't perfect. You can't just write someone off because they've made mistakes." "I'm not writing her off," I said, setting the plate down a little harder than I meant to. "I'm just saying, maybe her bad luck isn't luck at all. Maybe it's her." "Kevin," Lana said, her voice softer now but still firm. "I get that you don't like Maria. You never have. But she's my friend. My good friend. I need you to be civil to her. Can you do that for me?" I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my irritation. I'll be civil, but don't expect me to play nice beyond that. Keep her away from me, Lana. Work had been a nightmare lately. The factory was running like a well-oiled machine until last month when a fire broke out in one of the storage areas. It wasn't a full-blown inferno, but it was enough to shut us down for 3 days and throw the entire production schedule into chaos. I got the call at midnight, a manager's worst nightmare. "Kevin, we've got a situation here," came the panicked voice of Sam, the night shift supervisor. "There's been a fire in Bay 3. The sprinklers handled most of it, but the smoke damage." "I'm on my way," I said, already pulling on my jeans. When I got to the plant, the place reeked of burnt plastic and charred wood. A few employees were milling around outside, looking dazed, while the fire department packed up their gear. Sam met me near the entrance, his face ashen. "It was the wiring," he explained as we walked toward the damaged area. "We've had issues with the old panels before, but this was bad. Half the inventory in that bay is toast." I spent the rest of the night assessing the damage and sketching out a plan to get us back on track. Over the next few weeks, I practically lived at the factory. Meetings with the insurance adjusters, coordinating repairs, reworking schedules. It felt like I was juggling a dozen balls and couldn't drop a single one. Meanwhile, back at home, Lana was spending most of her time with Brenda and Maria. I'd come home late at night to find the house dark and quiet, the faint smell of Lana's perfume lingering in the hallway. She'd leave me little notes, "Dinner's in the fridge. Love you." I appreciated it, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Maria was working her way further into our lives while I was stuck at the factory. After a month, things finally started to settle down at work. Repairs were done, production was back on schedule, and I told my boss I needed a break. "You've earned it," he said, clapping me on the back. "Take the week off. Just don't disappear completely. I'll still need you on email." When I got home that evening, Lana was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she chopped vegetables. "Hey, stranger," she said with a smile when she saw me. "Hey," I said, setting my bag down and leaning against the counter. "Guess who's got a week off?" Her face lit up. "That's great, Kevin. You deserve it." "Yeah," I said, watching her closely. "So, what VE you been up to while I've been buried at the factory?" "Not much," she said casually. "Just hanging out with Brenda and Maria." There it was again, Maria. I bit back a sigh and tried to keep my tone neutral. "Maria's still around every day?" "Not every day," Lana said, giving me a look. "She's my friend, Kevin. And she's been a big help while you've been busy. She even brought over a casserole last week." "A casserole?" I said dryly. "Well, maybe she's not completely useless." "Kevin," Lana said, her voice tinged with warning. "I'm just saying," I replied, holding up my hands. "She's been divorced 3 times, Lana. 3. If you can't get it right the second time, maybe don't try for a third." Lana set down the knife and turned to face me, her expression serious. "That's not fair, Kevin. You don't know what she's been through. Not everyone has it as easy as we do." "Easy?" I said, incredulous. "You think my life's been easy these last few weeks? That factory fire didn't put itself out, Lana. And while I was working my ass off to keep us afloat, you were what? Having brunch with Maria and swapping sob stories. That's not fair." Lana snapped, her eyes flashing. "You've been gone for a month, Kevin. A month. What was I supposed to do? Sit here alone and wait for you to come home?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to stay calm. "Look, I get it. You need your friends. But I don't trust her, Lana. There's something about her. I don't like it. And I don't want her around me." "She's not around you," Lana shot back. "She's around me. And Brenda. And she's been nothing but kind, Kevin. The least you could do is be civil." I met her gaze, my voice low but firm. "I'll be civil. But don't ask for more than that. Keep her away from me, Lana." That week off hadn't started the way I'd hoped. The house felt different, like there was something unsaid hanging in the air. One afternoon, I came back from running errands and found Lana and Maria on the couch, arms wrapped around Brenda, who was crying into a tissue. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my keys on the counter. Lana looked up at me, her expression a mix of concern and hesitation. "Ben filed for divorce." I blinked. "What? Ben and Brenda?" She nodded. "Brenda doesn't want to talk about it yet. She's still processing." I shook my head, leaning against the doorway. I never would have guessed. Those two seemed solid. Lana sighed. "Sometimes things aren't as perfect as they look on the outside." Maria, who had been quietly stroking Brenda's back, looked over at me. "It's a tough time for her. We're just trying to be here for her." Something about the way Maria said it. So calm, so matter of fact, set my teeth on edge. I pushed the thought aside and forced a casual tone. You know what I think?
It's Maria's curse.
Lana shot me a sharp look. Kevin, I'm just saying, I said with a shrug. Everywhere this woman goes, marriages fall apart. Maybe it's time to consider the common denominator. Kevin, stop, Lana said firmly. She's Brenda's friend, our friend, and she's just trying to help. Be civil. I raised my hands in mock surrender. Fine, fine. I'll keep my thoughts to myself, but I didn't stick around. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy, and I needed to clear my head. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, deciding a drink might help me unwind. I ended up at O'Malley's, the local bar, nursing a beer and replaying the afternoon in my mind. That's when I spotted Ben sitting in a corner booth, a glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked like hell, disheveled and hollow-eyed, like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Ben, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Didn't expect to see you here. He glanced up at me, his expression bleak. Hey, Kevin. I gestured toward his drink. You okay, man? Lana told me about, the divorce. Ben let out a bitter laugh and took a long sip of his whiskey. Yeah, well, that's what happens when someone else starts living in your marriage. I frowned. What do you mean? It's Maria, he said, his voice tight. She was way too involved. Brenda started consulting her about everything. Everything. To the point where she wouldn't make a damn decision without running it by Maria first. Even stupid things like buying drapes for the living room. Drapes? I asked, trying to follow. Ben's jaw tightened, and his hands clenched around his glass. And then, he trailed off, shaking his head. And then what? I pressed. Ben's eyes welled up, and he looked away, his voice breaking. I can't, man. I just can't. Before I could ask more, he slid out of the booth and left the bar, leaving me staring after him. When I got home, I told Lana what Ben had said. She frowned, her arms crossed over her chest. I don't know anything about that, Kevin. Brenda hasn't said a word to me about Maria causing problems. Well, maybe you should ask her, I said pointedly. Because if Maria's screwing up their marriage, who's to say she won't start meddling in ours? Lana's eyes narrowed. That's not fair. Maria's just trying to support Brenda. She's been nothing but kind to her. Yeah, and look where that kindness got them. I shot back. I'm telling you, Lana, keep away from Maria. It had been one of those long, exhausting days where all I wanted was to sink into the couch and let the world fade away. The factory was back in full swing, but the pressure to meet quotas after the downtime was relentless. By the time I got home, all I could think about was a hot shower, a cold beer, and maybe catching up on that crime show I'd been watching. Lana was already in the living room when I walked in, curled up in her favorite chair with a book. She looked up as I set my bag down and walked over to collapse onto the couch. Hey, she said softly, setting the book aside. Hey, I replied, kicking off my shoes. You okay? She got up and came to sit beside me, tucking her legs underneath her. Yeah, I'm fine. Just wanted to talk to you about something. Her tone was light, almost playful, but there was something in her eyes that made me sit up a little straighter. Sure, I said cautiously. What's on your mind? She smiled, tilting her head slightly as she looked at me. Kevin, do you love me? The question caught me off guard, and I let out a small laugh. Well, of course, honey. Why would you even ask that? She reached out and took my hand, her smile growing a little wider. I've been thinking about us, about our life together, and there's something I want to discuss with you. I nodded, still trying to read her expression. All right, go ahead. She took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. You're the first person I ever dated, Kevin, and the first person I ever, had sex with. I raised an eyebrow. Okay. She smiled again, a little nervously this time. It's just that, lately, I've been feeling like maybe it's time for me to experiment a little. Experiment? Okay, let's buy a Kama Sutra book. I am all for it, I repeated, my mind already scrambling to process what she was saying. Yeah, she said, nodding. I mean, I love you, Kevin. I do. But I've been wondering what it might be like to experience other things. Other people. I blinked, trying to make sure I'd heard her right. You're saying you want to, spice things up in the bedroom? Try new things? We can do that. We'll buy a Kama Sutra book or something. Lana shook her head, her smile turning almost apologetic. No, Kevin, that's not what I mean. I want to try other men. For a moment, I just stared at her, my mind struggling to catch up. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to go off. Finally, I found my voice. Other men, I said slowly. She nodded. And then it hit me, like a flash of lightning. My jaw tightened, and I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. Let me guess. Maria suggested that, didn't she? Am I right? The look on Lana's face said it all. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened slightly in shock. She didn't need to say a word. I knew I'd hit the mark. Maria. That woman had been planting ideas like weeds in my wife's head. I stood up, the couch creaking slightly as I moved. My heart was pounding, a mixture of anger and disbelief surging through me. I turned to face Lana, my voice steady but edged with a firmness I couldn't suppress. Lana, I began. We've been married for 7 years. And not for a single day in those 7 years have I had even the slightest desire for another woman. I've been faithful to you, completely. I've never let my eyes, my heart, or my body stray. And you know what? I expected the same from you. That's what a marriage is, isn't it? Faithfulness. Commitment.
Respect.
She stared at me, her lips trembling as she tried to find the words to respond. I didn't let her. If my expectations are too much, I continued, my voice rising slightly, then maybe you should take some advice from your good friend Maria. File for a divorce. Lana gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Kevin, you don't mean that. You wouldn't fight for our marriage? I looked her straight in the eye, my jaw tight. No, Lana, I wouldn't. Because once you decide to break the vow, to forsake all others, you don't just break a promise. You destroy a marriage. You destroy the trust, the love, the foundation of everything we've built together. She looked stricken, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't mean, but I cut her off again. So, my dear wife, I said, my voice dropping to a cold, steady tone, be very careful about what you decide. Because if you so much as entertain the thought of acting on this experiment, I'll file for divorce before you open your legs for another man. I didn't wait for Lana to say another word. I walked past her, my mind racing, my heart pounding, and headed straight to our bedroom. The thought of staying in the same bed as her after what she just said made my skin crawl. She followed me, her voice trembling as she called out, Kevin, wait, please, it was just a discussion. That's all it was. I didn't answer. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Some clothes, my toothbrush, a few essentials. Lana stood in the doorway, her tears falling freely now. Kevin, please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to talk about how I was feeling. I zipped the bag shut and turned to her, my face set. And this is what you decided to talk about? How you want to sleep with other men? Do you even hear yourself, Lana? Do you understand what you're saying? She sobbed, her hands clasped tightly together. It wasn't like that. I wasn't saying I was going to do it. I just wanted to be honest about what I was feeling. I shook my head, slinging the bag over my shoulder and brushing past her. No, Lana. The moment you let the thought of having sex with another man into your mind, you started down a path I can't follow. And right now, I can't even look at you without feeling betrayed. I made my way to the guest room, dropped the bag on the bed, and turned to face her as she stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. We'll only get back to where we were when I can be sure you've dropped this insane idea, I said, my voice firm. And the first step you can take is to drop that woman Maria as your friend. Her face crumpled, and she opened her mouth to argue. But I held up a hand to stop her. Trust me, Lana, I said, my voice dropping. She will drag you through hell. 3 days. 3 long, silent, agonizing days. I didn't speak to Lana, and she didn't try to speak to me. She knew where I stood, and I wasn't about to back down. Maria hadn't been around the house, at least not when I was home, but I wasn't naive. I could feel it in the way Lana avoided me, the way her phone was always near her. She was still talking to Maria. That thought simmered in the back of my mind, stoking the anger that refused to leave me. If she'd really cut ties with that woman, she'd have come to me by now, trying to make things right. Instead, she stayed quiet, like she was waiting for something. The next day, I came home from work, the tension in the house as thick as ever. Lana was in the shower when I noticed her phone sitting on the couch. She'd never been one to lock it. There was no need. At least, there hadn't been before. But now, the sight of it sitting there felt like an invitation, a test of sorts. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. My hands felt strangely steady as I unlocked it and went straight to her messages. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. The chat with Maria. I scrolled, my eyes moving quickly over the texts, my anger growing with each passing word. Maria wrote, "Don't worry, he'll come around. Men always do." Lana responded, "I don't know, Maria. I don't want to lose him. I feel like I've already made a mess of my marriage just by bringing it up." Maria wrote back, "He loves you. He'll get over it. Even if you sleep around and tell him, he can't do a thing about it. It's your body, babe. You deserve all the fun." My grip on the phone tightened as I read the last message Lana had sent. "I'll think about it." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, my anger boiling over into something colder, sharper. "I'll think about it." So, Lana was still thinking about it. My hands were trembling, not with hesitation but with cold, calculated anger as I forwarded the screenshots from Lana's phone to mine. I double-checked to make sure the messages had been deleted from her sent folder, then carefully set the phone back on the couch, exactly as I'd found it. I couldn't stay in the house. Not then. Not with her in the shower, clueless about what I'd just uncovered. I grabbed my jacket, my car keys, and left without saying a word. The drive to my lawyer's office was a blur, my thoughts racing the entire way. When I arrived, I didn't waste time. As soon as I sat down, I laid it all out for him. The conversation with Lana, the silent tension over the past few days, and the disgusting texts I'd read from Maria. My lawyer, James, listened carefully, his expression neutral but his brow furrowing slightly as I spoke. When I finished, I handed him my phone with the screenshots. He glanced at them, then stopped, holding the phone in midair. "Wait," he said, looking up at me. "You said her name was Maria?" I nodded. "Yeah, Maria. Why?" He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I was in court for her last divorce. I didn't represent her, but I remember the case. She's been divorced 3 times, Kevin. In every single one of those marriages, she was caught cheating with multiple men. Every time, she claimed her husband was abusive, and every time, the court sided with her." I frowned, my grip tightening on the edge of my chair. Why would the court believe her? James gave me a grim look. "Because she's a damn good actor. She knows how to work the system, and unfortunately, she's gotten away with it. You need to be very careful about her influence on your wife." I exhaled sharply, trying to process this new information. "What do I do, James?" He studied me for a moment, then asked, "What do you want? Divorce? Separation?" I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. "I still want to be with my wife. I still love her, and I'm willing to work through this, as long as she doesn't cheat on me. That's the line I can't cross." James nodded slowly. "Then here's my advice. Keep an eye on her. Watch for any changes in her behavior, any signs that she's moving further down this path. And most importantly, try to talk to her. See if there's still a chance to steer this ship back on course." I left James's office determined to have a final conversation with Lana. I needed to know where we stood, whether there was still something to salvage. But fate had other plans, and I never got that chance. When I got home, Lana wasn't there. Her car was gone, the house empty and quiet. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. The calls went straight to voicemail, over and over again. Frustrated, I decided to wait. That evening, as I sat in the living room, staring at my phone and wondering where she was, it rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Mr. Kevin?" a man's voice asked, serious and professional. "Yes," I said, already feeling the tension rising. "This is Officer Daniels with the local police department. We need you to come to the hospital. There's been an incident involving your wife." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. "An incident?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "What happened? Is she okay?" "Please just come to the hospital, sir," he said, his tone giving nothing away. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my keys and rushed to the hospital, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the fluorescent lights of the emergency room burned harshly against the night, and there, standing just outside the entrance, was Maria. She saw me and started walking toward me, her face pale and drawn. "Kevin, wait," she said, reaching out to me. I shook my head and brushed past her. "Not now, Maria," I snapped. I didn't have the patience or the energy to deal with her. Inside, the smell of antiseptic hit me like a wall, and the nurse directed me to Lana's room. When I walked in, she was lying on the bed, her face streaked with tears. She looked at me, and for a moment, it seemed like she wanted to say something. But I didn't have time to process it because the doctor approached me, pulling me outside. "Mr. Kevin," he said, his voice calm but clinical. "Your wife sustained some injuries to her vagina. They will heal in a few days, but I'd recommend laying off sexual activity until she's fully recovered." I stared at him, his words not making sense. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice hoarse. Before he could respond, the cop who had called me appeared. He gestured for me to step aside, away from the doctor and Lana's room. Mr. Kevin, he began carefully, your wife was found at a party during a drug raid. She was in a very compromised position with 3 men. The air seemed to leave my lungs, and I felt like I might collapse. What do you mean? Compromised how? He hesitated, then said, she was engaged in sexual activity with them. When we found her, she was crying and claimed that the men forced her. A small sliver of hope rose in me, that maybe she had been a victim in all this. But the officer's next words shattered that. We reviewed the CCTV footage from the property, he said, his tone grim. She wasn't forced. She was there on her own will. We are still investigating the assault angle, but it seems a bit difficult to prove. I walked into Lana's hospital room, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and confusion. There she was, lying on the bed, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. She kept repeating the same words over and over again, like she was trying to convince herself. I didn't want to, but they forced me. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked over to her and gently placed my hand on hers, trying to offer some comfort. Just rest, Lana, I said quietly. We'll figure this out. But I couldn't stay in that room. The words, the situation. It was all too much. I walked out of the room, my mind racing. As soon as I stepped into the hallway, I saw Maria. She caught my eyes and froze, her face going pale when she saw how furious I was. Without a word, she turned and ran for the exit. I didn't chase her. There was no point. I knew I'd deal with her later. I stayed with Lana at the hospital, sitting by her side and doing my best to care for her, even though the thought of her betrayal gnawed at me. I called my boss to let him know what had happened, and he gave me a few days off to take care of everything. The next day, I took Lana home. I didn't say much during the ride, and neither did she. We both knew the silence was thick with the weight of everything that had happened. At home, I took care of her, made sure she had everything she needed. I cooked for her, helped her with the things she couldn't do on her own. But I never stayed in the same room with her. She had her own space, and I had mine. It felt like the only way to keep the distance I needed. A week later, I came home to find Lana sitting on the edge of the bed, her expression hopeful, like she was trying to piece things back together. Kevin, she said softly, her voice trembling. I love you. I want us to move past this. I want you to come back to the bedroom. I want to make love to you. I stood there, my body rigid, the words cutting through me. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out of the room, not trusting myself to speak. For the next 2 days, Lana wouldn't stop begging me. She kept trying to talk, apologize, promise things would be different. But I couldn't bring myself to respond, not when everything inside me felt so torn apart. I couldn't pretend things were fine. On the 3rd day, I finally told her to come to the kitchen table. She walked in, her face a mix of hope and desperation, like she was waiting for some kind of sign from me. I sat down across from her, folding my arms, trying to keep my emotions in check. Do you still want to experiment, Lana? I asked, my voice steady but cold. She looked at me, unsure, and I saw the anxiety in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer directly. I just said, call Maria. We need to talk. She looked confused, but she didn't argue. She took out her phone and called Maria. I could hear a muffled conversation on the other side of the room, Maria's voice light with curiosity. Has Kevin forgiven you? She asked. Lana's response was barely audible, but I heard her say, maybe, yes. A few minutes later, Maria walked through the door. She sat down in one of the chairs without saying a word, her eyes glancing between Lana and me. I didn't waste any time. I looked at Lana, making sure she knew this was serious. How did you get to that party, Lana? Her head immediately dropped, her eyes cast down to the table. I went with Maria, she muttered, her voice small, like she was trying to shrink under the weight of my questions. And did you know there were men waiting for you when you got there? I asked, not giving her any leeway. She nodded, her face flushed with shame. Yes, she whispered. So, you knew exactly what would happen. You knew you would have men to entertain you, I said, my voice turning harsh. You were not forced. She looked up at me then, tears brimming in her eyes. I reached there, but I changed my mind at the last moment. I told them to stop, but they didn't. And then, just like that, she started crying again. So, let me retrace what happened. You discussed the party with Maria, then you decided that you will go to the party, then you got dressed for the party, then you got in a car and reached the destination, then you met the men, then you got undressed, and then you decided not to have sex and wanted them to stop. Maria quickly spoke up. Yes, that is exactly what happened. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I fixed my gaze on Lana. The tension between us was thick, and I could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on me. Answer me, woman, I shouted, my voice booming with enough force to visibly shake her. She flinched, her eyes widening as if she hadn't expected the outburst. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, she looked up at me. Her voice trembled as she said, yes. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything, but there was no time for reflection. My hand reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. I didn't hesitate, dialing the number I had in mind. I waited a moment for the line to connect before I spoke, my tone unwavering. Please go ahead, I said, the words cold but deliberate. A man dressed in a sharp suit walked into the room, his presence cutting through the tension like a knife. Without a word, he handed Lana a manila envelope. You've been served, he said coolly. I watched as Lana took the envelope, her expression unreadable. Then the man turned to Maria, handing her an envelope as well. You've been served. That's when I couldn't hold it in any longer. I took a breath, my voice steady but firm. I've filed for divorce, I said, my eyes locking onto Lana. Then I shifted my gaze to Maria, my anger rising. I've sued you for breaking my marriage. Maria's face twisted in disgust. Without warning, she flung the envelope at my face. I've seen enough of these, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. I don't give a damn about your marriage. I stood there, the sting of her words hitting harder than the envelope itself. But it wasn't just that. She had thrown it at me. I couldn't let that slide. You threw that envelope at me, I said, my voice rising, sharp with anger. That's assaulting me in my own home. She didn't hesitate. Without a word, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. I got up, the anger burning through me, but deep down, I knew she had crossed the line. Maria ran out of the house and I could see it in her eyes. She knew she had gone too far. I wasn't going to let this go. I followed her, running after her into the cold night. She quickly got in her car, slamming the door shut, and took off. Without thinking, I jumped into my truck and sped after her, determined to catch up. She should have headed home, but no, she took off onto the freeway. The rain started coming down harder, the sky darkening as the headlights of our vehicles cut through the storm. I could barely keep up as she weaved through the wet roads. She was not trained to drive fast. I saw her skid. The back of the car whipped out from under her, and in an instant, it went off the road. My heart stopped as I watched the car tumble, spinning out of control before it finally came to a halt. I jumped out of my truck and ran toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw her there, crumpled and broken, blood staining the ground beneath her. Both her knees were bent unnaturally, out of place, and blood was pooling around her. She was in bad shape, and I felt the sting of reality sink in as I reached her side. Her phone was lying on the ground nearby, and I picked it up, my hands trembling. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. I took out my own phone, ready to dial 911, but as I looked at her, something stopped me. I stared at her for a long moment, unable to make the call. My mind was racing, but nothing felt real. I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching her struggle for air, her breathing becoming more labored, slower. 30 minutes passed in silence, the rain falling harder, the world around me spinning in slow motion. I walked over to her, kneeling beside her. My hand reached out to check her pulse, but there was nothing, just silence. I pulled my phone back out of my pocket, my fingers shaking as I finally dialed the numbers. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end asked. I swallowed, my throat tight. I need help. There's been an accident. I stood there, waiting for the team to arrive. It felt like time had stopped, the rain still pouring around us, the air thick with a heaviness I couldn't shake. When they finally came, I heard the words I had been waiting for. The victim is dead. I left shortly after, my mind numb as I drove home. I didn't know what to expect, what I was going to walk into. But when I walked through the door, there she was, Lana, still crying, still reeling from everything. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. The weight of the world was pressing down on me, and I didn't know how to say what needed to be said. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady but cold. I lost her, I said. I'll get her next time. I know I lied, but then my happy life was just killed by that witch. The tears in Lana's eyes intensified, but I couldn't feel any sympathy. My mind was already miles away. I took a deep breath before continuing. You should start packing your things. I want you gone by morning. Her sobs increased, but I couldn't allow myself to be moved by them. She pleaded, but I stopped her with a look. Lana, I said, my voice softer now but still firm, you did everything I warned you about. You thought about sleeping with other men. You arranged for it. You did more than what I consider cheating. You crossed lines that I can't unsee. I paused, watching her as she struggled to process my words. I filed for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. I went on, each word deliberates. Not because of your cheating, but because I cannot live with you, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if you'll let another friend poison you and destroy my marriage. The next morning, Lana was gone. She packed her things quietly, avoiding eye contact with me. She left without a word, but I could see the anger, the confusion, the bitterness in her eyes. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't try to hold on to anything. I had made my decision, and it was final. Lana fought the divorce petition with everything she had. She hired lawyers, tried to spin the story, but I wasn't backing down. She even suggested therapy, trying to salvage something, anything, but I wasn't interested. I shrugged off her attempts at reconciliation. I'd had enough of her lies, her manipulations. The trust was gone, and it couldn't be repaired. A year passed before the divorce was final. The whole process drained me. I lost a lot of money, not just in court fees, but in the final settlement. But the one thing I didn't lose was the house. It was the one thing I could hold on to, the one piece of stability I had left. I found out that Ben and Brenda had gotten divorced too. It wasn't something I expected, but when I met Ben one day, we ended up talking about everything. It felt like two men who had both been through the same storm, in different ways, but still scarred by the same kind of betrayal. He looked rough, worn out from the battle. The kind of exhaustion only a divorce could bring. We sat down over a drink, and he started to open up about what had happened. You know, Ben said, staring into his glass, Maria poisoned Brenda's mind. She kept talking about this idea of an open marriage, about being free and not being confined. I didn't know what to think, but Brenda started buying into it. Maria got into her head, telling her it was the only way to be happy, to not feel trapped. I could feel the anger building up in his voice as he spoke, but there was a hint of sorrow too, like he was mourning what could have been. Everything changed after that, Ben continued, shaking his head. Brenda started pulling away, becoming someone I didn't even recognize. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. I didn't know what to say. I could relate to his pain, to the feeling of being deceived. But in the end, Ben looked me in the eye and said, "So I got divorced." I listened to Ben, feeling the weight of his words as he spoke about Brenda. It was painful to hear how Maria had gotten in her head, how she had turned everything upside down. I had my own experience with Maria, and hearing his story only confirmed what I already knew. I looked at Ben, shaking my head. "Maria's a snake," I said, the bitterness in my voice undeniable. She never wanted any of her friends to have a good married life. I honestly think she was jealous of what we had. She couldn't stand seeing other people happy in their relationships. She wanted them all to be like her. Messed up and broken. Ben sighed, taking a slow drink. "I guess we were both fools, huh?" "We were," I agreed, clinking my glass against his. "But now we know better." I don't even know why I didn't see it sooner. Maria had a way of getting into people's heads, manipulating them. It was like she wanted to destroy everything good around her. I paused for a moment, thinking about my own pain. "I filed for divorce, you know," I said quietly, looking at Ben. "It wasn't just the cheating. It was the constant fear, the wondering if she was going to find another friend to poison her mind, to pull her further away from me. I couldn't live like that anymore." Ben nodded, a silent understanding passing between us. We both knew the cost of what we'd been through. From that point on, Ben and I started meeting occasionally. We didn't talk about the past every time, but it was always there, lingering beneath the surface. Sometimes it felt good just to have someone who understood, someone who had been through something similar. Lana spent some time in therapy after everything, trying to pick up the pieces of her life. A few months later, she remarried. It was almost like everything was moving forward for her, like the past didn't matter. She got what she wanted in the end, and I was left with a sense of emptiness. As for me, I'm still here, still single. I occasionally date, but I keep my distance from love. I can't let myself get close to anyone like that again. It hurts too much. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Donald. I am 56 years old. This is my first time trying to explain my life. I am married to Lorin, 45-year-old, and we have a daughter, 13-year-old. This is something that happened a few months ago. My wife and I were visiting Istanbul along with our daughter. We were part of a big group, 3 families and around 16 people in all. The trip had come to an end, and we were supposed to return together. We all had gathered at the Istanbul airport for our return back to Chicago. It is an 11-hour flight. We all gathered and did a count for accounting everyone. The flight was delayed by 6 hours. Since we still had 6 hours till we get our flight, we all went to the lounge, and to our surprise, it was empty. We were the only people there. Everyone gathered and started chatting. All smiles and stories of Turkey and the good food we had. I went for a smoke and returned after 15 minutes. As I walked close to my wife, I saw a slim figure near her. As I walked closer, my heart started beating faster. Not because of the nicotine, but this was something else. The closer I got, the faster it beat. I could almost hear my heart trying to jump out of my heart. My mind went blank and took me back 20 years back. I was holding her hand. I was right there in the church. She was right beside me. I said, "I do," and then kissed her. I took her home. We had a life. She was right there. Suddenly, I was right back in the lounge. I walked near my wife and told her I want to get some air and walked out. I did not look at the woman who was now talking to my wife. As I walked out, the floodgates to my memories opened up. She was right there. She was happy. I was happy. I closed my eyes and I was back in Columbus, Georgia, right beside the Chattahoochee River. We sat there often. Her name is Maria. She is my life. I have always loved her, ever since I saw her in college. She was mine. We got married and moved in together. Married life started great. I started working as a journalist, and she was a financial expert. My job required me to travel, and travel a lot. I was going places covering stories from war to famine. All this while I always kept in touch with her. Her sparkling eyes made my day. When I was at home, we spent our time making love and enjoying great food. She used to cook and it was delicious. "Will you always love me like this?" Maria asked while looking into my eyes. I stroked her bare back and told her forever and ever. First 2 years of our lives went by smooth, and it never felt like there will ever be any trouble in paradise. We decided to delay having kids as we needed to make a name in our careers. We wanted to make good money and settle down. The only trouble that we had was that we were not able to spend time with each other. I traveled, and soon Maria's job also required her to travel. The only point of discontent that we had was my mother. She lived alone and often wanted to see me. My wife never liked her. I never asked why. My mother is a very soft and caring person. I try to keep them separated and keep a balance between them. It was in the month of January that my mother fell ill. I told my wife I am going to her so that I can care for her. She was not happy as I had just come home from covering a story in Iraq. We had an argument as she wanted me to hire a help for my mother and not go personally. I told her that my mother is old and this might be the last time that I see her alive. Maria was unhappy, but I did not bother on that. 3 days later, my mother died in my arms. I was devastated. After her burial, I came back home and Maria once again complained about my mother. I was shocked and could not understand what she was trying to say. She put us in so much trouble. She should have been in the hospital right from the start. I was silent and was still trying to understand what will Maria get from demeaning a dead person. I shot back, "She is dead. She will not come back and respond. So zip it." Maria got angry, and that week we did not speak to each other. I broke the ice by taking her out for dinner. That night we made wild love. The next week, I went out to Afghanistan, covering the historic Silk Road. Maria, meanwhile, was getting her promotions and growing her salary. I returned 2 weeks later, and this would be the time that went to Afghanistan. I reached home and Maria, like always, greeted me with a big hug and a sloppy kiss. At the dinner, I saw her a bit tensed. "We need to have some changes in our lives." She spoke. "What changes do you want?" I asked. "You being away from home for long durations is not helping me. There are days that I long for your touch, and I come home to an empty bed. I don't want to cheat on you. So, either find a job that keeps you near me or find me a job so that I can travel with you." I was in a fix, but at the same time I was happy that she was honest and spoke the truth. I told her that I will find another job. The topic was over, and the next morning I resigned from my job and started looking for a near-to-home job. I soon found one at the local TV channel. It did not pay as much as my previous job, but kept me near Maria. "Your salary is down by 30%? Are you kidding me?" She was angry when I told her about my job. I tried to explain that this would be a downside for a stationary job. Women, no matter how educated and intelligent they are, at times do not want to acknowledge facts and still want things to go their way. It would not be possible to get a stationary job and still get a hike, unless you change your profession. She was upset that I now bring less to the home and her lifestyle will be impacted. Somehow, we went on with that. Over the next 3 months, things started to go downhill. We were talking less, and at nights we rarely getting any action. Her demeanor had changed from loving wife to nagging bitch. She could find faults in everything, and there was not a single day that I would go to bed not angry. It got so bad that one night she asked me to stop breathing, as my breathing is disturbing her sleep. A few days later, I could not find my phone, so picked up my wife's phone to call my number. I found her phone locked. It was something new. I did not have my lock on my phone, and she never had any lock on her. Why was there a lock? Is she hiding something? It was a Thursday night. She came back after a late-night party with her office girls. I heard the doorbell and opened the door. She stood there in a black dress, her hair all disturbed. No lipstick. What happened to you? I asked and held her. I danced a bit too much, and now I am tired. I guided her to our bedroom. She removed her dress to change in her usual nightdress. That was a big mistake. She had no panties and I could see bruise on her left thigh. She never goes out without her panties. Did she go commando today, or did she lose them somewhere? That night I could not sleep and just lay there. Being a journalist by nature, I wanted to know the truth. I know a lot of people who can help me find it out, but I knew my shit and needed no help. 3 weeks later, I was outside the Motel 6 at Victory Drive. It was 2:30 p.m. and I tracked Maria's car to this motel. I walked towards room number 12, opened the lock, and saw the monitor. Right across the door, in the other room, was my beloved wife. There she was, on all fours, and her blonde lover, in action. Her blonde lover, Steve Bowman, my dear enemy from our college, always had hots for Maria and once even took her out for a date before Maria started dating me. "Do me good," Maria screamed in ecstasy. Steve obliged. By now, my tears no longer flowed. I was dead inside. My heart ached. 3 weeks of investigation and running around Maria did yield results. Results that I never wanted. I wanted to break open the door and do something very stupid, but I had promised the motel manager that I will refrain from violence. He was paying back for an old favor and put up a single condition: no violence and no property damage. He agreed and personally helped me put the recording devices in the room. But violence was never off the table outside the motel. I smiled and walked out of the motel, got in my car, and parked right behind the only Mustang that was parked in the parking. It belonged to Steve. I took out my dear old ice pick and decorated all four. I waited. After 1 hour, they came out, Steve holding Maria by her bare waist. I took that on camera. I put my camera back and came out of my truck. I walked towards them and stood right in front of them. Maria was silent, looked like she saw a ghost. Steve had a grin on his face, symbol of taking another man's wife. He still held her by the waist. Maria was meekly trying to remove his hand. "Hey Dawn," she smiled. "What are you doing here?" I started back at her. She went silent. She tried again. "I can't explain. It's not what you think." I am not thinking, just observing. My eyes pointed at Steve's hand on her waist. "I guess he has taken away my wife." I smiled. "No, it's not that. We just had a meeting here." She spoke. "Meeting involved getting on all fours and getting drilled from behind. Did he do you good?" I asked. She gasped as just a few minutes ago she had uttered the same words. "All your action is on video and we'll be going to your office and I will make sure it goes to all our friends and family, and yes, it will be going to Linda and her dad." Steve screamed, "Leave Linda out of this." I smiled and said, "Linda has already seen your action, Liv, and is just waiting for the copy so that she can drag your sorry ass in court for a divorce. If I were you, I would prepare myself to say goodbye to dear old Mustang, as it will be sold out to pay for the settlement." He was furious now and lunged at me. Big mistake. Years of travel to places like Iraq, Afghanistan made me a tough man. I had been among warriors, fighters, and people who were trained to kill. Did they teach me a few tricks? He threw a right hand and I blocked it, ducked forward, and landed my left on his chin. He dropped like a bag of potato. He got up, wobbled a few steps towards me, only to get an uppercut on the chin. He did not get up. He lay there, out cold. Maria stood there horrified. I looked at her and told her to get in the truck. She got in the truck and we drove off. We did not reach home. We went straight to my lawyer. Maria tried to ask, but I just held up my hand. We walked in the office and were asked to move to the large conference room. We both sat in the opposite sides of the table. The silence was dreadful. Soon, Ron Freeman, my lawyer, walked in the room, handed an envelope to Maria. "You have been served. Now let me explain the terms." We have filed for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. You guys hold no property, there is nothing to discuss there. His mother's house is yet to be legally transferred in his name. So, you will not claim that. He will give you half of the money from your joint account. As we speak, the account has exactly half the money it had in the morning, so you may withdraw it. Since you earn more than him, there is no alimony. There is nothing else from my end. Ron left the room. Maria held the envelope and looked at me. Finally spoke. In case you want to contest it, I will change the reason for the divorce under adultery and make sure that every soul that knows you name will know of your cheating exploits. Every recording I have will be shared on all social media platforms. I will send this to your office and make sure that your cheating ass is fired and you get no recommendation anywhere. You run away to a different city, I will follow you and make sure that rest of your life is spent in fear of your name being tarnished. I hope I am clear. She nodded. I got up and walked out. She stood up and spoke. Don't you want to know why I did it? You wanted a lifestyle that I cannot provide. You wanted to fly high but wanted someone at home when you land back. You wanted happiness but were not willing to pay the price for it. Fast cars, big fancy hotels, and good food. Your blondie lover gave you everything that I could not. You think that right, isn't it? I am not sure if you will understand it or not, but he was just paying for his fun time. He was already married and was looking for a cheap source of entertainment. How long would that have lasted? A few months. Then what? Would you have gone out, hunting for another lover? Then another? Your happiness is just a state of mind. You can be happy with less, or you can be sad with a lot. Today you stand here with an envelope in your hand and nothing else. Have a nice day, Maria. I left. I saw her in the court a few months later, never spoke to her, never saw her eyes. Just the court's orders. Divorce granted. Steve never filed for any complaint against me. Even if he had filed for it, he would have lost. There were cameras in the parking, and he would have come out as the aggressor. I did send Linda the videos and all the evidence of Steve's adultery. She did not waste time with him. Threw him out of the house and divorced him. I did hear a rumor that he was beaten up by Linda's brothers, and he spent a few days with some broken bones. He was divorced and even had lost his job. Linda's father was a connected man. Steve did sell his Mustang to pay for his settlement. I never told this to anyone, but Linda's father wanted to punish Maria as well. Linda stopped them. I left my job and soon enough I was hired back in my old job, but in a different city. Life went on. Here I am today, at Istanbul airport. Chief journalist for a big magazine. Loads of money. A great faithful wife and an amazing daughter. I walked back in the lounge. My wife was still talking to her. Hours passed. I stayed away from my wife. She was constantly talking to Maria and stealing glances at me. I was worried. I never hid my past from my wife, but I don't know what Maria will plant in her mind. A few hours later, I checked with the airport officials and they confirmed the departure time. We got in the boarding queue, and after some grueling minutes, I was finally in the flight and sitting right beside my wife. She was smiling and her smile was a lot different than usual. I asked her, what was the discussion with that lady? Oh, that lady, your ex-wife Maria. I was saying thanks. I gave a puzzled look. Thanks? I asked. If she had not screwed up, how would I have got you? She smiled. Did she tell you that? I asked. No, she never talked about you. I read the court's orders and your investigative material. They were in the attic. What were you two talking about? Nothing, I was just listening how she missed her ex-husband and how she would trade everything to get a life like mine. I smiled and closed my eyes and pushed back into my chair. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The smell of motor oil and grease was a constant in Mario's life. The hum of the garage was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos at home. For the past 12 years, he had built a life with Grace. The early years had been good, great, even. They laughed, dreamed, and made plans together. Ricardo was born during those golden years, and Mario felt like life couldn't get any better. But life has a way of taking unexpected turns. It started gradually. Grace became irritable, her words sharper. At first, Mario thought it was just stress, maybe a rough patch. But as months turned into years, her negativity became a daily storm cloud over their home. Mario tried everything. Flowers, date nights, listening without judgment. But nothing seemed to ease the tension. She would lash out over the smallest things. A tool left on the kitchen counter, a late return from the garage, or even Ricardo's playful messes. Do you even care about this family, Mario? She'd yell, her voice echoing through the house. Mario endured her words in silence most of the time. He didn't want Ricardo to see them fighting. Instead, he poured his love and energy into his son. Ricardo was his light, a reminder of better days. They'd spend hours tinkering with Mario's old truck, playing soccer in the backyard, or just talking about life. Ricardo adored his father and often asked him, "Dad, why is Mom so mad all the time?" Mario never had an answer. The situation took a serious turn last year when Grace fainted in the kitchen. Mario rushed her to the hospital, heart pounding in fear. After hours of tests, the doctor delivered grim news. Grace had developed a heart condition. The doctor explained that stress and negativity were major contributors and urged Grace to adopt a more positive outlook. "It's not just about medication, Mrs. Gonzalez," the doctor said firmly. "You need to make lifestyle changes, both physically and mentally. Let go of the negativity. It's harming your heart and your family." For a moment, Mario saw a flicker of vulnerability in Grace's eyes. She nodded quietly, but as the weeks passed, little changed. She would try. Mario could see that, but her anger and frustration always bubbled back to the surface. Mario tried to help her, encouraging her to find hobbies, see a counselor, or even join him and Ricardo for their backyard games. But Grace seemed trapped in her own cycle of resentment. Mario often found himself alone in the garage late at night, staring at an old photo of the three of them from a happier time. Ricardo was just a toddler in the picture, his tiny hands clutching Mario's shirt as Grace laughed beside them. That laughter felt like a lifetime ago. He loved Grace, he truly did, but he couldn't deny the toll her negativity was taking on their family. There were moments when he felt helpless, caught between his love for his wife and the need to protect Ricardo from the toxicity at home. He worried about how this environment would shape his son. One evening, as Mario tucked Ricardo into bed, his son looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Dad," Ricardo whispered, "do you think Mom will ever be happy again?" Mario's chest tightened. He forced a smile and kissed Ricardo's forehead. "I hope so, Mijo. I really hope so." But deep down, Mario wasn't sure. He could fix engines, rebuild transmissions, and diagnose the trickiest car problems, but he didn't know how to fix Grace, or if she even wanted to be fixed. All he knew was that he had to keep going, for Ricardo's sake. He'd keep showing up at the garage, finding solace in the rhythm of his work, and he'd keep being the father Ricardo needed. But as for Grace, Mario could only pray that one day, she'd choose to let go of her anger and embrace the love that still surrounded her. Doctor called Mario a week later for discussing Grace's condition. "Her condition is a bit more serious than what we think. She needs to start taking extra care, and you need to make sure that she does not get sudden shocks that may be fatal for her. Exactly why I asked you to come alone for her reports." Mario had barely settled into his routine after the doctor's grim warning about Grace's heart condition. The weight of her fragile health and the doctor's advice to avoid shocking her hung heavy on his mind. As he drove home that evening, he rehearsed how he would approach Grace with kindness, hoping they could find a way to navigate her condition together. The sun was setting as he pulled into the driveway. The house was unusually quiet when he stepped inside, but the living room lights were on. Grace was sitting on the couch, her posture stiff. Across from her, with a smug expression on his face, sat Jose, Mario's boss. Mario frowned, sensing something was off. "Grace? Jose? What's going on?" Grace stood up, crossing her arms as if preparing for battle. Her voice was sharp but steady. "Mario, sit down. We need to talk." Mario didn't sit. He felt his chest tighten. "What's this about?" Grace took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "I filed for divorce. I'm leaving you." The words hit Mario like a freight train. He blinked, trying to process what she had just said. "What?" "I'm leaving you, Mario," she repeated, her tone cold and resolute. "I've been seeing Jose for a while now. He's financially stable, successful, and he can give me the life I deserve. Also, he is better than you in bed." Mario stared at her, stunned into silence. Jose leaned back in the chair, his lips curling into a smirk. Grace continued, as if she were trying to justify herself. "I didn't want to hurt you anymore. That's why I'm telling you now, so you can move on." Mario's shock quickly morphed into a simmering anger. He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You didn't want to hurt me anymore? Well, Grace, that's real noble of you. You're practically a saint. Maybe the Vatican should canonize you." Grace glared at him, her expression darkening. "Don't be sarcastic, Mario. I'm trying to do this the right way." Mario's gaze shifted to Jose, who was leaning forward now, as if eager to see how Mario would react. Mario smiled, a sharp, humorless grin. "Jose, congratulations, man. You're getting a real gem here. Good luck." You're going to need it. Jose opened his mouth to speak, but Mario raised a hand, cutting him off. He turned back to Grace, his tone now icy and deliberate. You want to marry Jose? Fine. But here's the deal. No alimony. And I get full custody of Ricardo. No negotiations. Grace's eyes widened, and for a moment, she hesitated. Full custody? Yes, Mario said firmly. You want a new life with Jose? Go ahead. But Ricardo stays with me. You're the one walking out on this family. You don't get to drag him into your mess. Mario sat across from his lawyer, frustration etched on his face. She wants alimony and custody of Ricardo, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. She cheats on me, tears apart our family, and now she wants to take my son? Over my dead body. His lawyer, a seasoned professional named Sarah, nodded sympathetically. We'll fight this, Mario. The court doesn't look kindly on infidelity, especially when it's openly admitted. But we need to prepare for a long battle. Mario clenched his fists. He didn't care about Grace anymore, not after everything she'd done. But Ricardo? That was different. Ricardo was his world, and Mario would do whatever it took to protect him. The courtroom battles began shortly after. Grace was relentless, insisting on alimony and custody of Ricardo. Mario, on the other hand, wasn't going to make this easy. He filed motions to delay the proceedings and requested marriage counseling as a last-ditch effort. Not because he wanted to save their marriage, but because he wanted to drag the case out as long as possible. Grace was furious when she learned about the counseling request. You don't even want to fix this marriage, Mario, she hissed during one of their court-mandated sessions. Mario leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're right, Grace. I don't. But the court thinks we should try, so here we are. Maybe it's time you took responsibility for your actions instead of running away to Jose. The counselor, a calm woman named Dr. Patel, tried to mediate. Grace, this is a safe space. If there's anything you'd like to share, now is the time. Grace hesitated, her gaze darting between Mario and Dr. Patel. Finally, she blurted out, I'm cheating on him, okay? I've been with Jose for months, and I don't regret it. Mario and I are over. Mario's heart clenched, not because of the revelation. It wasn't news to him, but because of the callousness in her voice. Dr. Patel nodded solemnly, jotting down notes. Thank you for your honesty, Grace. I'll include this in my report to the court. Grace's face paled. Wait, you're telling the judge? Dr. Patel nodded. I'm required to submit an unbiased report based on these sessions. The judge will review it as part of the case. Mario fought the urge to smirk. This was exactly the kind of ammunition he needed. The judge, a stern man with a deep voice, looked down at Grace from his bench. Mrs. Gonzalez, I've reviewed the counseling report. Admitting to infidelity while seeking custody and financial support does not paint you in the best light. Your actions have disrupted this family, and you've shown little regard for the well-being of your husband and child. Grace looked down, biting her lip. Mario's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client is willing to grant a divorce on the condition that there is no alimony and that he is awarded full custody of Ricardo. The judge glanced at Mario, then back at Grace. Mrs. Gonzalez, do you have anything to say? Grace lifted her chin, defiance flashing in her eyes. Ricardo is my son. He belongs with me. I won't let Mario take him from me. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Mr. Gonzalez, while I sympathize with your position, family law prioritizes the child's relationship with their mother unless there is overwhelming evidence to suggest otherwise. Therefore, I am granting Mrs. Gonzalez full custody. There will be no alimony awarded. Mario's heart sank. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm as the gavel struck. Outside the courthouse, Grace approached Mario with a smug smile. Guess you didn't get what you wanted, did you? Mario turned to her, his expression calm but his voice steady with resolve. No, Grace, I didn't. But remember this, you might have Ricardo now, but you'll never be able to take my love for him away. And when he grows up and sees who we both really are, he'll know the truth. Grace faltered for a moment before walking away with Jose, who had been waiting by the steps. Mario stood there, watching them leave, his mind already racing with plans. He might have lost the battle, but the war wasn't over. He would be there for Ricardo, no matter what it took. It had been a week since Grace and Jose returned from their honeymoon in Hawaii. Mario knew this day would come, the day he'd have to drop Ricardo off at their house for his first visit. The thought gnawed at him, not because he wanted Grace back, but because he couldn't shake the feeling that Ricardo deserved better. A week after the divorce was final, Grace married Jose and moved in with Ricardo in Jose's house. She left for her honeymoon and left Ricardo with Mario. A week later, the drive to their house was quiet. Ricardo sat in the back seat, holding his favorite action figure. Mario glanced at him through the rearview mirror, his heart heavy. Mario drove up to Grace and Jose's new house, a pristine suburban mansion with a freshly mowed lawn that screamed of new beginnings. Mario turned to him with a soft smile. "Stay in the car, champ. I won't be long," he said, ruffling Ricardo's hair. "Okay, Dad," Ricardo replied, nodding obediently. Mario took a deep breath, stepping out of the car and walking up the driveway. The weight of everything Grace had put him through sat heavy on his chest, but he wasn't here to argue. He was here to finish things his way. Grace opened the door before he could knock. She looked different, happier, maybe, with an air of smugness that Mario couldn't ignore. "You're late," she said curtly, glancing past him. "Where's Ricardo?" "In the car," Mario said, his voice steady. "I needed to talk to you first." Grace frowned. "What is it, Mario?" "I don't have all day." Mario reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled lottery ticket, holding it up for her to see. "Remember the night you told me about Jose? When you said you were leaving me? I bought this lottery ticket on the way home." Grace crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. "So? You're here to tell me you've started gambling now?" "How typical." Mario ignored the jab, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's not just any ticket, Grace. This one is special. Go on, check it." Grace narrowed her eyes, snatching the ticket from his hand. She looked at the numbers printed on it and quickly pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she searched for the winning numbers. Mario stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her expression change. First, confusion, then disbelief, finally, shock. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. This is the winning ticket. $40 million. Mario's smile widened, his voice laced with calm sarcasm. "Yep. Collected the money last week." Grace's eyes widened, and for a moment, her voice softened. "Mario, you didn't tell me? We could've." "Could've what?" Mario interrupted, his tone cutting like a blade. "Split it? Shared it?" "Sorry, Grace, I had a better idea. I donated every single penny to the Red Cross." Grace froze, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. "You donated it? Are you insane? You could've kept it and had to give you half?" Mario finished for her, his voice calm but sharp. "No thanks. I'd rather see that money do some good than let you or Jose touch a dime of it." Her face drained of color. "You're bluffing. You didn't actually." Mario leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Check with the Red Cross. They'll confirm it for you." Grace's breathing grew shallow, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. You're lying. Tell me you're lying." Mario tilted his head, his smile unwavering. "Believe what you want, Grace. It's done. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a son to take care of." Grace's face twisted in panic. She took a shaky step back, clutching her chest. "You," she began, but her voice faltered as her knees buckled. Mario watched her crumble, collapsing onto the floor in a heap. For a moment, he stood there, his face unreadable. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the ticket fluttering on the doorstep. As he reached the car, Ricardo looked up at him, concern in his young eyes. "Dad, is everything okay?" Mario smiled warmly, opening the car door and sliding into the driver's seat. "Yeah, champ. Everything's fine. Let's go home." He started the car, pulling out of the driveway without a backward glance. The phone rang that evening as Mario was finishing dinner with Ricardo. The sound startled him out of his thoughts, but when he saw the caller ID, Grace's father, he knew it wasn't going to be good news. "Mario," the older man's voice trembled, barely holding itself together. "It's Grace. She's gone." Mario froze, his fork hovering midair. "What do you mean, gone?" "She had a massive stroke. It happened earlier this evening," Grace's father said, his voice breaking. "The doctors couldn't save her." Mario put the fork down, leaning back in his chair. A strange mixture of shock and detachment washed over him. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said carefully, unsure of what else to say. There was a pause, and then Grace's father asked, "Mario, did you say anything to her? Anything that might have upset her?" Mario raised an eyebrow, surprised by the accusation. "What? No, I didn't say anything that would have upset her. She told me you were there earlier to drop Ricardo off." "Did you argue with her?" Grace's father pressed. Mario sighed, gripping the phone tightly. "Look, She wanted me to take Ricardo back with me for another week because she said she wanted more time with Jose. I reminded her about her heart condition, the doctor's warnings, everything. She didn't want to hear it. And Jose? Grace's father asked, his tone laced with frustration. I tried to talk to him about it, Mario replied, but he wasn't interested in hearing anything from me. Maybe he thought I was just trying to meddle in their lives. I don't know. There was a long pause before Mario added, almost too bluntly, maybe too much sex killed her. She wasn't listening to anyone, and neither was he. The line went silent for a moment, and then Grace's father muttered, "Damn it, I told her. I told her she was overdoing it." The conversation ended soon after, but that was far from the end of it. A few days later, Mario heard through the grapevine that Grace's father had filed a complaint against Jose, accusing him of causing Grace's death by ignoring her doctor's recommendations and having too much sex with Grace. He even attached the medical advice that had explicitly warned Grace to avoid stress, physical or emotional, due to her heart condition. Mario couldn't help but chuckle darkly when he heard the news. Well, this just keeps getting better, he muttered to himself. Jose, who had once been so smug about marrying Grace, was now under investigation. The media caught wind of the unusual case, and Jose's reputation took a significant hit. Mario stayed out of it, focusing on Ricardo and his own life. One evening, Mario's phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Jose, I know why you wished me luck, Mario. Grace made the honeymoon hell. I could not have sex with her even for a single day. She drained me with her words so much that by the time she took me to bed I was mentally exhausted. I should have seen it coming. I wanted to run away every single day. I screwed up marrying her. Mario stared at the message for a moment before smirking. He didn't bother replying. A week later, Mario heard that Jose had sold the house and left the city. No one knew where he went, and frankly, Mario didn't care. All that mattered was that Ricardo was safe, and the chaos Grace had brought into their lives was finally over. Mario leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the wooden armrests, gripping them tightly as the memory resurfaced. He had been calm, eerily so, on that fateful day when Grace had thrown her betrayal in his face. Her smugness, her callousness, her sheer disregard for the life they'd built together had ignited something inside him. That night, as he sat in his garage, staring at the crumpled remnants of his world, an idea took root. He had bought a lottery ticket the day everything fell apart, but it wasn't a winner, not even close. Yet the thought of Grace, a woman who had torn him apart with such cruelty, benefiting from anything he earned or won, made his blood boil. He had spent hours at his computer, carefully crafting the deception. He downloaded images of a winning ticket, studying the fonts, the colors, every minute detail. Using Photoshop, he meticulously altered his own ticket to match the winning numbers. It was flawless, a ticket that could fool anyone, even Grace. The plan wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, something darker. Mario replayed that scene in his mind, the way he had waved the ticket in front of her like a magician, revealing the final act of an illusion. He remembered the way her expression had shifted, from irritation to shock, and then to pure disbelief. She had fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she checked the numbers online. Her face had turned pale as she stared at the screen, how she clutched her chest and how she collapsed on the ground, and how effortlessly he walked away from her without a hint of pity or remorse. Mario exhaled deeply, running a hand over his face. He had known her heart condition was precarious. He had known the shock could kill her. And yet, in that moment, as she lay on the floor, he hadn't felt guilt. He had felt free. Was it wrong? The question lingered in the air, but Mario didn't dwell on it for long. Grace's choices had destroyed their family, had hurt their son, and had nearly broken him. Her death, while tragic, was the culmination of her own actions, or at least, that's what he told himself. He looked out at Ricardo, who was now drawing pictures with chalk on the driveway. The boy deserved a peaceful, happy life, free from the chaos his mother had brought into their home. For Mario, the ticket had been nothing more than a tool, a final act to sever the toxic hold Grace had on their lives. And now, with her gone and Jose out of the picture, Mario felt like he could finally breathe again. He stood up, walking over to Ricardo and ruffling the boy's hair. "Come on, champ," he said with a smile. "Let's go get some ice cream." As they drove off, Mario glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. This time, he wasn't just moving forward. He was leaving the past behind, for good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.